Chapter 165. Looking at the array in front of him that was constantly swallowing and spitting out various types of energy, Yin Nuoxing smiled with satisfaction. To be able to remodel an array, although it was due to the evil spirit eye, it was enough to prove his ability. At least, the majority of people could only stare at an array and did not try to remodel it. Aside from master rank array masters, other array masters rarely tried to remodel their own arrays. After all, when an array was born, many things were already set in stone. To remodel, it would require a tremendous amount of effort, and it might not even be possible to remodel it according to one's wishes. The difficulty of remodel was not lower than creating it. After admiring herself for a while, Yin Nuoxing placed the elemental conversion array to the side and summoned the energy condensation array. After looking at it for a while, she felt a bit nervous. Modifying and strengthening an array and merging an array were two different things. Modifying an array was just making small changes to the original foundation. However, merging two arrays required the array cores of the two arrays to be placed together. Combining the two extremely large amounts of information and the countless energy patterns would be integrated. Even creating a new array would not be that difficult. I don't believe this can stop me. Clenching her teeth, Yin Nuoxing clenched her fists tightly, making cracking sounds. Without resting for a moment, the evil spirit eye operated again and directly pierced through the two arrays. The arrays in her line of sight appeared from the void and extended dozens of energy lines, rushing straight into the array cores of the arrays. In the outside world, in the sky above Yuyan City, the azure ocean weaved by formations broke out of the spirit formation world a month ago. After that, there was not the slightest movement. The densely packed formations wrapped the inside of the spirit formation impenetrably. Other than Yin Nuo, there were also many people who used various methods to try and peek inside. However, no matter how hard they tried, they could not see the slightest bit of the situation inside. That muffled but abnormally loud sound, like the sound of a gear being stuck, came from the sky and entered the ears of everyone in Yuyan City. It was extremely ear-piercing, causing everyone's expression to suddenly change. Some were happy and some were worried. They could even hear some fear in the voices coming from every corner. Countless people raised their heads and looked at the azure ocean. They discovered that there seemed to be a touch of light purple. No, it wasn't that there was a color added, but that part of the formations that perfectly wrapped the purple night flame had been burned into nothingness. Occasionally, they could see the light purple that everyone was looking forward to through the gaps between the tens of thousands of formations. Through the blue light, they could vaguely see the purple flames rising, constantly burning the transformation formations. However, there wasn't a trace of high temperature that seeped through the formations. It seemed that even though there were some holes that had been burned, the formations hadn't been completely destroyed. The chaos in Yuyan City seemed to have lessened a lot. A month ago, in the Jiyuan Mountain Villa, many experts had met there. Although they did not reach a good conclusion, Jin Wang and the others have been evacuating the ordinary people in Yuyan City since that day. Most of them were sent to the cities adjacent to Yuyan City, such as Crimson Star City or Star Underworld City. Although there were people who persistently stayed here, there were also people who could see that the purple night flame would not break the seal so quickly. They turned around and left to find a place to rest and conserve their energy. There were also people who were wise enough to stay away from Yuyan City and observe from afar. They did not stay in Yuyan City like the majority of people. When the first small eruption occurred, they had personally experienced how terrifying the so-called divine flames were. The purple night flame that had been sealed for nearly 60 trillion years was not something they could touch. Although the arrays could seal the purple night flame, it did not seem to be able to prevent the energy from entering. Once the energy that had been accumulated for countless years exploded, the entire Yuyan City would be destroyed in an instant. A bunch of idiots. They all ran over to watch. Although the eruption of the purple night flame is glorious, they still need to be alive to see it. On a mountain peak 1,000 miles away from Yuyan City, in the manor of the Nine Shrine. At this moment, Jin Wang and the others were leisurely sitting in the courtyard, holding a small wine cup in their hands. They looked calm and did not feel nervous at all. It was as if what was happening 1,000 miles away had nothing to do with them. In any case, we have done what we should have done and said what we should have said. As for their choice, it's up to them. The Gold God King sighed helplessly. He had spent a great deal of effort to evacuate the people. However, there were some people who stubbornly wanted to stay in Yuyan City. As for those stubborn people, he had no choice but to let them go. Aside from the Yuyan Pavilion and the Chung clan, the original forces in Yuyan City have all ran to Star Underworld City to seek refuge. They left some scattered spies around Yuyan City. The Water God Emperor lay on the stone table in boredom. He drew circles on the table with his finger and said, "As for the external forces, I have not seen any of them retreat. However, there are a few forces like us who have already run to the outskirts of Yuyan City. What about the Sacred Weapon Shrine?" The Thunder God Emperor raised his eyebrows and asked, "They're still in Yuyan City, recuperating. What happened that night has been completely erased. Unless the Underworld Emperor or an even stronger expert comes to investigate what happened that night, they will not know what happened," the Water God Emperor said indifferently. Water God King said indifferently. That night, they had beaten up a group of people in Sacred Weapon Divine Palace and seized the Sacred Weapon Great Formation. Then, together with Yi Shi, they had erased the memories of all the people in Sacred Weapon Divine Palace. Then, they had stuffed in some fake memories, such as simulating the eruption of the Purple Night Dark Flame. They had completely fooled the people of the Sacred Weapon Shrine. There seems to be someone outside looking for that little guy. However, they're not doing it openly. At this time, the beautiful woman suddenly turned her gaze and looked at Jin Wang. Oh, Jin Wang was also slightly taken aback. Now, the people of Yuyan City basically knew that they wanted to protect Yunnuashing. The name of the Nine Deities Shrine was enough to cut off many people's thoughts. However, they were still able to find out that someone had such thoughts. This was a bit blatant. The people of the Snow God sect and the Ice and Snow Mountain Villa seemed to be involved as well. There are also traces of the Chung clan. The beautiful woman said indifferently, "The little guy's speed of making enemies is quite fast." Hearing these three forces, Jin Wang bitterly smiled. Not to mention the Chung clan, the first two could be considered as first-rate forces. One had stood tall in the Sourcepeak region for many years, while the other was a great force in the Divine Prefecture. However, in terms of reputation, they were far from being comparable to the Nine Deities Shrine. They had existed since the ancient times and were still the overlords of the God Realm. They had never been afraid of anyone. Anyway, the little guy is also in closed-door training. There won't be any problems in a short period of time. I'll find some time to go and knock some sense into him. Most likely, he wants to settle old scores or snatch the Ling Hong sword. The Golden God King stretched and gave a long yawn. Hearing this, the beautiful woman's expression became somewhat complicated. She said, "Why exactly are you protecting that little guy? Don't make it sound like I'm a bad person." Jin Wang rolled his eyes at her and said, "I just want to protect him. If you saw it that day, no, actually, Xiaoying, you should have felt it too. That child's temperament is just like a child who has just grown up. He's a good piece of unpolished jade that can be carved. So, in the name of protecting him, I protected him for a period of time and let him remember the good of the Nine Deities Shrine. Then, I tricked him into joining the Nine Deities Shrine. In the future, he will be another high-level god. This is really wishful thinking." The Fire God King rolled his eyes. "Really? How can this be called tricking? This is called guiding. Do you understand?" Jin Wang grinned. The other God Kings rolled their eyes at him. They had been roaming the world together for so many years. How could they not know what this old bastard was actually thinking? The beautiful woman was only worried that Jin Wang was up to no good. Moreover, with Yunnuashing's temperament that was as free as the wind, she might not be tricked into joining the Nine Deities Shrine by Jin Wang. A divine item, like the Ling Hong sword, can only be obtained by those who are fated. Just like the spirit of the divine weapon that Xian took away, it is their own ability to obtain it. I don't covet it. I'm just afraid that some people will have bad intentions." Seeing the beautiful woman frowning, Jin Wang smiled. "So, where did that little girl go?" Hearing him mention Yuan, the Thunder God King twisted his arm and couldn't help but ask. After coming to Yuan City, they met for the first time. When they met for the second time, at Juyuan Mountain Villa, Yu Xian disappeared. Later, she also left Yuan and the two children to them. I don't know. That person can't be measured with normal thinking. His children also can't be understood with normal thinking. Maybe she went somewhere to cause trouble? Jin Wang shook his head. He really wasn't worried about Yu Xian. She had many divine tools and controlled sealing arrays. She could trap or even kill divine underworld experts. He wasn't worried about how many people could touch her. Yu Xian's protection level is the highest in the 9 deities shrine. Don't lose her if you don't pay attention, the Fire God King said indifferently. Huh? Are you kidding? She has already been lost. Jin Wang jumped up in fright. The other God Kings were stunned. Soon after, they smiled bitterly. It seemed like they hadn't seen Yu Xian for a long time. Right before I came out, our home master said, if you see Yu Xian, if possible, bring her back to the 9 deities shrine. Of course, if she doesn't want to, then let her be. It's fine as long as she is safe. Anyway, there will be a day when we will have to deal with the 9 deities shrine. The Water God King raised her head and paused for a moment. Then, she said seriously, if you feel that the 5 of you can't protect Yu Xian, then call the other 4. If you still can't do it, then bring along the eternal divine weapon. If you still can't do it, then let the great elder and the others bring along the eternal divine weapon. The God Kings were stunned, and then they all sucked in a cold breath. The Home Master was going to protect Yu Xian. Yu Xian is that person's child. So, I can understand the Home Master's words. Jin Wang's face twitched. He took a few deep breaths and couldn't help but smile bitterly. The eternal divine weapon was one of the greatest trump cards of every transcendent force. It was the weapon of a god. In the past, the 9 deities shrine had gods. The weapons they left behind were equivalent to half of a god. They could unleash the power of a god. It could be said that it was an extraordinary deterrent. Who would have thought that the Hall Master of the Water God Shrine would say something like bring along the eternal divine weapon? The Great Elder and the others are all at the peak of the Emperor of the Underworld. They haven't been involved in worldly affairs for a long time. As for the Great Elder of the Divine Wood Palace, at least the last time I saw her was 30,000 years ago. The beautiful woman couldn't help but smile bitterly. We are fine. The Great Elder comes out every day. Morning exercise. The Fire God King smiled. The other God Kings. In the sky above Yuyan City, the Azure Spirit Array suddenly trembled slightly. Then, the spirit array that was constantly changing suddenly slowed down. It could even be seen with the naked eye. The energy array that was hundreds of thousands of miles long was also quietly changing. Boom! The entire spirit array suddenly trembled violently, like a star swaying. That movement startled Jin Wang and the others who were thousands of miles away. The noisy Yuan City also stopped abruptly. Everyone hurriedly raised their heads, fear in their eyes. The surging purple flames were like a dazzling sun. The restrictive spirit array couldn't stop it from releasing energy and radiating light. Every time the purple flames pounced on the spirit array, it would cause it to tremble violently. Just one impact alone couldn't cause the entire spirit array to tremble. It was easy to imagine what kind of impact was taking place in the spirit array at this moment. No way. Again? You're moving. Jin Wang could not help but curse. With such violent tremors, the purple night flame was not calm at all. The other God Kings were speechless. What kind of terrible description was that? However, they did not have the time to complain. The Water God King waved her hands, and a majestic aura slowly surged out from her body. A huge spirit array suddenly stood in front of the mountain. Light flowed on it, and it looked extremely tough. Wang. However, just when everyone thought the spirit array was about to collapse and the Water God King was prepared to withstand the impact, countless black runes appeared from the spirit array. They densely covered the surface of the spirit array. They were so profound and complicated that no one could understand them. The moment the runes appeared, the surrounding energy of heaven and earth became chaotic. It poured into the spirit array like water ripples. The vibrating spirit array gradually calmed down. Phew! Seeing the spirit array gradually calming down, the entire city let out a sigh of relief. They thought the spirit array was about to collapse. Chapter 166. The black runes were like tightened reins that once again restrained the wild horse that had just broken free. The surging faint purple flames also calmed down once again. They were still charging at the formation, but they were no longer as crazy as before. Looks like it stopped. Seeing that the black runes had temporarily calmed down the flames, the water god king let out a sigh of relief. With a wave of his hand, the formation before him dissipated. But there's not much time left. Old water, how long do you think this formation can last? Jin Wang asked, wiping away his cold sweat. Hearing that, the water god king narrowed his eyes, staring straight at the huge formation in the distance. After pondering for a while, he shook his head. This is the first time I've seen a divine formation. I'm not sure about its structure, its form, so I can't deduce it. But if it continues to develop like this, I estimate, in less than 4 months, the seal will be broken. The flames can be dispersed, but not blocked. Even if the person who set up this formation is a god, 60 years have already passed. After such a long period of time, this powerful formation has already reached the point of exhaustion. So, 4 months is actually the limit. Water God King analyzed. However, according to Yanua Planet's own going in to take a look, using the evil spirit eyes inference, it might only be 3 months. And now, a month had already passed, so no one knew which time was correct. 4 months? Huh. Jin Wang sighed in distress. Right now, Yin Nuoxing was in seclusion, and Yin Nuoxing had disappeared. They had 5 Shiming experts here. Including Xiao Xian, it was only 6. Yishi only listened to Yin Nuoxing, and in the end, it was possible that Yin Nuoxing and the others would act alone. 6 Shunming experts. Jin Wang sighed heavily. This number was already very powerful. However, compared to the many independent cultivators, it was still not enough. Those independent cultivators were the greatest variable in this battle. The Light Shrine still hasn't sent anyone. Those old geezers are too low-key, Jin Wang suddenly said, as if he was talking to himself. However, when he looked back, he saw Yao Hua and the others slowly walking out of the hall. Yao Hua's words were naturally directed at him. He had been out for a long time, but he hadn't seen the elders of the Light Temple come out. If he had their help this time, snatching the Purple Night Dark Flame would only be a matter of minutes. Although the Light Temple didn't have many people, each one of them was a big shot in the world of cultivation. Their speed had long surpassed the speed of light, and they could even reverse time. This was a power that only Rebirth Realm experts had. Hearing this, Yao Hua bitterly smiled, waved the golden token in his hand, and said with a bitter smile, I just finished talking to the elders. The elders said to let us solve it ourselves. The Violet Night Dark Flame is only ranked 90th. If we can't obtain it, then forget it. Those old geezers are really irresponsible. The faces of the God Kings immediately darkened when they heard that, and they grumbled. They had never sent anyone out. It had always been Yao Hua traveling outside, and they had always let him deal with everything by himself, even though the Light Shrine had always let their only disciple grow freely. If Yusin was here, we might be able to give it a try. She might be able to snatch it. Divine flames are natural things. No matter which fire element cultivator obtains them, they'll be of great help to them in the future. If she can obtain it, her path in the future will probably be smoother. Jin Wang poured a cup of wine and drank it all in a single gulp. He could not help but sigh. Yusin had the element of light and the element of fire. If he had to ask who had the greatest chance of obtaining it, Jin Wang felt like it would be her. God King, are you selling your life for someone else? Hoya frowned when she heard that. She seemed to be rather displeased, and she could not help but mumble. Everyone was stunned when they saw her bitter look. Soon after, They laughed involuntarily. They had forgotten that this little girl was also very interested in the divine flame. It's the fortune of whoever can subdue this thing. Old Jean was just saying it casually. Patting Huaya's head with his palm, the Fire God King said softly with a smile in his eyes. However, he could not help but wipe away his sweat in his heart. According to the situation of the Hallmaster and the others, it was really possible for them to join hands and forcefully pave Yusin's future path. A divine flame would make her path much smoother. Of course, he could not say this out loud. The 9 people in front of him were the most talented ones in his family. They were the young talents who would inherit the title of God King in the future. He had to let them experience it, not preach it. Pouting her little mouth, Huya somewhat gloomily nodded. Of course, she also knew that with Yusin's ability, she might really be able to snatch the Violet Night Dark Flame from so many people. They had all personally experienced Yusin's strength, but when they heard Jin Jinwang mention someone else, they were a bit unconvinced. In terms of talent, the 9 of them were not necessarily any weaker than Yusin. Don't worry about little Xin. When the Violet Night Dark Flame erupts, she will come out. From the side came a crisp and beautiful voice. A red dress gently fluttered in the wind. Her long black hair fluttered like clouds as she gracefully walked over like a fairy. Glancing at the change formation above Yuyin City, Mei Mao's eyes slightly flickered. Ah! Seeing her come out, the Fire God King let out a cry of surprise. He looked at Yuyin with a bit of surprise. Feeling the blazing aura around her, he couldn't help but say in astonishment, Mortal Step 11th Extreme, 7th Revolution? Jin Jinwang was also slightly surprised. He remembered that a month ago, Yuyin was only around the 10th Extreme. How did her rank soar so much in just a month? Those with good talent would be able to reach the Mortal Step very quickly, but this speed was a bit excessive. Yao Hua and the others also stiffened. They couldn't help but cough and shake their heads. This was truly abnormal. 1 extreme in a month. At this rate, it wouldn't even take half a year for her to reach the immortal step. Yuyin sighed and helplessly said, There's no other way. Little Xin has always been thinking about the Violet Night Dark Flame. This time, she seems to be going all out. I have to pave a way for that little fool so that if something goes wrong, I can safely evacuate with her. Yuyin added, Also, little Xin said that she went into the array to take a look. It seems that it will break in 2 months. 2 months. Jin Jinwang jumped up and widened his eyes. Then, he turned his gaze to the Water God King and said, Old water, didn't you say 4 months? Hearing this, the Water God King bitterly smiled. Didn't he say that he had never seen the divine restriction array before? After all, it was just a guess. How would I know? I already said that it was just a guess. Are you still in contact with Yuyin? The beautiful woman looked at Yuyin with some astonishment and said. Yuyin nodded. Mei Mao looked at Jin Jinwang and the others, but couldn't help but roll her eyes. She couldn't help but mutter in her heart, If they know that little star is little Xin, I wonder if they will vomit blood. As she thought about it, she couldn't help but smile. At first, she decided to disguise Yun Nuoshing as a man. It seemed like it was a very good decision. Until now, no one had seen through her disguise. Seeing her smile mysteriously, everyone looked at each other and shook their heads helplessly. Jin Jinwang looked at the array that sealed the Violet Night Flame and was stunned for a moment. In Yuyin City, in a remote corner of the 3rd floor of Qingyan Restaurant, for people sat there drinking tea out of boredom. There were 2 men and 2 women, and they all looked very handsome. One of the women wore a veil, but from the faint curve of her face, one could see her hazy beauty. The 4 of them were naturally Shuige and the others. They looked gloomy and would occasionally look up at the sky. From the empty space in the middle of the restaurant, they looked unfocused, as if they were waiting for someone. Buzz. Not long after, the space in front of the 4 suddenly fluctuated gently, making the 4 of them slightly happy. A moment later, a crack appeared in the space, and a slender figure walked out. The young man had a light smile on his face, and his long hair was casually tied up. Seeing the 4 people in front of him, he couldn't help but smile. He casually sat down and drank a cup of tea. Uncle, Why did you come personally? Seeing the young man, Shueji's joy immediately turned into astonishment. She smiled bitterly and said, I thought the family wouldn't get involved in this matter. I thought it would just be a random elder coming to deal with it. Ha! Since you two are so concerned, how can I not come out to take a look? The young man smiled and looked at Shuegu and Shueqing in surprise. He smiled and said, Brother and I have watched the two of you grow up, so we know very well that you too are autistic people. Other than the people in your family, you basically have no one to talk to outside. When I heard that you two have made friends, all the more I wanted to come and take a look. I want to see what kind of person he is to have abducted our two darlings. Shuegu and Shueqing's faces turned red, but they were stunned for a moment. They didn't say anything. Soon after, they seemed to have understood something. Their 4 eyes glared fiercely at Yufeng, causing his teacup to shake and almost spilled tea all over the table. Cough. Well, Uncle and the others asked us to take a look at your situation. I reported it as it was. You won't blame me, right? Murong Yufeng blinked and smiled at the two of them. However, what he received in response was 2 slaps. At the same time, the courtyard of the sacred weapon divine hall, which had been in ruins, had now been restored to its original state. Everything in the courtyard was in order. Regardless of whether it was Feng Yin and the others, or Duan Yuntai and the others, none of them showed any abnormalities. It was as if they had completely forgotten about what had happened that day. Even the disappearance of Duan Qinghai and Mu Qing did not seem strange. In the hall, Feng Yin and the others stood in a disorderly manner. They looked at the tall figure standing at the front with reverence on their faces. They said respectfully, Elder Lu, everything is ready. We are only waiting for the purple night flame to erupt. That person nodded his head gently when he heard this. A vast and mighty aura slowly flowed out from within his body. Wisps of strange ripples undulated in the air like water ripples, causing Feng Yan's group and the people in the courtyard to be startled. Cold sweat involuntarily flowed down from their foreheads. The other old friends probably know about the strange changes in the purple night flame. Be vigilant. The sacred weapon divine hall is determined to win this trip to Yuyin City. The faint voice was filled with determination, causing Feng Yin and the others to quickly nod their heads. But Elder Lu, if the 9 divine hall and the others intervene, Feng Yin thought of something and could not help but ask. The tall figure called Elder Lu seemed to tremble a little. A creaking sound was heard, and the surrounding space started to tremble slightly. This caused Feng Yin to tremble and bow even lower. Then we'll get rid of them while we're at it. The faint voice was filled with coldness, causing Feng Yin and the others to sigh. Was it really okay to offend the 9 divine hall for the purple night flame? However, they still nodded their heads. The sacred weapon divine hall was determined to get the purple night flame. The same scene was happening in the Ice and Snow Mountain Villa, the Snow God Sect, and many other places in Yuyin City. Needless to say, even ordinary people could feel that something was amiss in Yuyin City. Chapter 167. In the spiritual world, Yin Nuoxing slowly opened his eyes. His eyes were filled with seriousness. In front of him were 4 overlapping spirit arrays. If he looked closer, he could see that the 4 spirit arrays were intertwined with each other. The millions of energy lines were intertwined together like a ball of yarn. The 4 spirit arrays came from the same source, but were incompatible with each other. Different types of energy of different attributes were mixed together. If he looked closer, he could see that there was a gap between the 4 spirit arrays. They had not completely fused together, and there seemed to be a few transparent membranes separating them. It's over now. They're tangled together. Damn it. If it wasn't for the fact that 2 spirit arrays didn't have enough time to fuse, I wouldn't have fused all 4 spirit arrays together. Yin Nuoxing's body was covered in cold sweat. Looking at the 4 spirit arrays that were on the verge of going berserk, he could not help but want to curse. With his strength, it was too difficult to carry out such complicated changes. Not to mention him, even a true spirit array grandmaster would not be able to do it. Looks like I have to ask for external help. Yin Nuoxing slowly exhaled. He glanced at his body that had become much more illusory. More than half of his black hair that reached his waist had turned snow white. When he was forcefully fusing the spirit arrays previously, he had almost caused them to explode. With a gentle wave of his hand, a ray of light landed on the 4 spirit arrays. Immediately, the spirit arrays that were releasing berserk energy rapidly shrank in the span of a few breaths. In the end, they were only the size of a palm. However, the energy that they were releasing did not decrease by much. It's better to ask Shao Shi for help. If it doesn't work, I'll ask the Water God King for help. However, he might not care about me. Yin Nuoxing frowned slightly. After this experiment, he finally felt how difficult it was to fuse the spirit arrays. With his tiny spiritual strength, he could not completely control the 4 spirit arrays. However, if this spirit array is completed, it will combine the powerful attacks of the 10,000 spirits killing array and the sacred artifact array, the various types of energy of the elemental conversion array, and the refinement of the condensation array. It will solve my weakness of not being able to maintain it due to my lack of strength. Yin Nuoxing's eyes flickered. Then, she couldn't help but laugh. If this formation was completed, in addition to the many divine artifacts on his body, he would probably be able to contend against a divine underworld elite. As he laughed, Yin Nuoxing suddenly shook his head and looked at the sky with a serious expression. Although he was in the spiritual world, he had always been paying attention to the movements in the outside world. This was to prevent him from being in seclusion for too long and not being aware of the purple night dark flame erupting. If he came out of seclusion and the purple night dark flame was already taken away, then he wouldn't even have a place to cry. Once the purple night dark flames erupted, even if the array was not completed, he could only brace himself and face it. In the secret room, the huge cocoon of light suddenly trembled gently. Afterwards, the entangled threads slowly dispersed, and Yin Nuoxing's body was gently placed on the stone bed. A moment later, she opened her eyes somewhat weakly. She looked around and discovered that only Yishi was there. The 2 girls had run off somewhere. Sitting up with a bitter smile, Yin Nuoxing looked at Yishi. There was a dazzling array of materials piled up beside her. To his surprise, she was holding the beast skin of the nether abyss shark that she had bought the other day. She could see many profound energy patterns engraved on it. Faint golden energy circulated, making it seem extremely sacred. The faint golden light illuminated the dark secret room. Saint Technique Array. Looking at the golden array slowly engraved on the beast's skin, Yin Nuoxing's gaze became somewhat serious. It looked like Yishi really did not have any confidence in this trip. She had used a Saint Technique array right off the bat, and it was a sealing array at that. The forbidden power was extremely similar to the aura of the 10,000 spirits killing array. Those materials are not cheap either. Yin Nuoxing's face could not help but twitch when he inadvertently glanced at the pile of materials to the side. There were many things that he had never seen before. There were some that he might have recognized, but he could not recognize them because he had never seen them before. The energy ripples that overflowed from the bee's skin made his heart pound heavily. Looks like it's almost done. But wait a while. Staring at the dark blue bee's skin that was about to turn golden, Yin Nuoxing murmured enviously, "Where's the array diagram? When can I engrave one?" Engraving array diagrams was something that only grandmasters of formations could do. Every array diagram was very precious. Arrays that were engraved on a map did not require the user to use their own energy to activate. During battle, they could definitely cause unimaginable damage to the enemy if they were caught off guard. Of course, most of the array diagrams that could be bought on the market could only be used once. Only grandmasters of formations could engrave array diagrams that could be used repeatedly, and they also require the assistance of many materials. Of course, it did not mean that a grandmaster or grandmaster could engrave array diagrams. The creation of array diagrams required specialized methods. Carelessly engraving an array onto a scroll or bee skin would not last for long. Even if it could be activated, there would be deviations in the structure, and the power would be damaged. Moreover, There was a failure rate when engraving array diagrams, and the failure rate was not low. It consumed a lot of energy and resources, which was why a high-level array diagram was so expensive. The evil spirit looked outside the secret room, towards the outside of Yuyin City. Seeing the black talisman that looked like the demon's sealing talisman sealing the huge array, his pupils could not help but shrink. The talisman seems to be absorbing the purple night flame and forcefully sealing the array that has cracks. But why do I feel that the array is collapsing faster and faster? After pondering for a moment with a frown, Yun Nuoxing could only shake his head. He stared at the beast skin that was about to turn golden in Yixi's hand. On it, a palm-sized array was about to take shape, and it seemed like it would be completed soon. After letting out a long yawn, Yun Nuoxing rubbed his eyes and looked away from the golden beast skin. Blue flames rose from his fingertips as he wrote a few words in the air. He waved his hand and had it float in front of Yixi. Then he crossed his legs, took a few deep breaths, and entered a state of cultivation to recover the huge amount of energy he had consumed. Originally, when he was in the Heaven Ascension state, he was constantly refining energy. Before entering the Heaven Ascension state, he had even engraved an energy condensing array in the secret room, which gathered all the energy from a few hundred meters in the air. With such a huge amount of energy, it was reasonable to say that he would not run out of energy. However, if he wanted to fuse the 4 arrays, the amount of energy required was not small. After a few times, he gradually became unable to meet the demand. Helplessly, he could only withdraw from the fusion. Moreover, his soul power was almost exhausted. Just as he entered the state of cultivation, he unexpectedly discovered that there were 2 waves of energy in his soul that he had never sensed before. He could not help but be stunned for a moment. After a moment, with a thought, his consciousness sank into the soul between his eyebrows. What he saw was a huge silver imprint. It was the silver imprint that Xian Yin had left in his soul. It seemed to be a type of imprint of a god. Behind the imprint, there were 2 balls of light that he had never seen before. One was scarlet, and the other was a brilliant rainbow. What is this? He had not noticed it before, but now that he saw it, he was shocked. However, he was not too worried. Since these 2 balls of light could bypass the imprint of a god that Xian Yin had left behind, they probably would not be harmful to him. The almost transparent soul stood in front of these 2 balls of light. He crossed his arms and looked at them for a while. Just as he was about to reach out and touch them, he felt a wave of energy flow into his soul. This made him slightly happy. This was Yi Shi's soul wave. His consciousness quickly broke free from his soul. Just as he opened his eyes, he met a pair of wine-red crystal eyes that were only a few inches away from him. This made him stunned for a moment. His handsome face blushed, and he gently pushed her away with both hands. Then, with a thought, the array that was entangled into a ball of twine appeared in front of him. Yishi rolled her eyes at him. Mei Mao turned around and looked at the 4 arrays that were entangled with each other. There were even a few bolts of energy that were constantly emitting, which made her a little speechless. Are you planning to throw this mess to your cute little sister and not care about it? Yun Nuoxing quickly waved his hand and laughed dryly. I asked for your help, not for you to finish it alone. Hearing this, Yishi sighed. If I was still in my peak strength, it's not that I can't torment them to a conclusion. But now, even with the help of your evil spirit eye, it's really difficult to make the 4 of them fuse together. Her slender fingers kept poking Yun Nuoxing's head. Yishi said angrily, even an 8th-level master would fuse 2 arrays together. Who would be like you, fusing 4 arrays together? Isn't this, seeing that there's not much time left, I have to hurry? Yun Nuoxing smiled bitterly. It was not like he wanted to do all 4 of them together. His handsome face turned bitter, and he rubbed his face against Yi Shi's little face. He cried, Xiao Shi, help your stupid brother. Yi Shi's pretty face turned red from his rubbing. She quickly pushed him away and suppressed her turbulent state of mind. She quickly said, Okay, I'll help you. Other than me, who else can help you, Brother Nuo? After saying that, she waved her hand and summoned the 4 arrays in front of her. Then, she waved her hand at Yun Nuoxing and said, Brother Nual, I want your eyes. Yin Nuashing nodded and opened his evil spirit eye. Palm-sized arrays appeared. Then his hands formed hand seals with lightning speed, condensing the arrays on his palms and gently sending them into Yishi's eyes. Then, Yin Nuashing's two bright eyes quickly dimmed and finally returned to their original pitch-black color. After borrowing Yin Nuashing's evil spirit eye, Yishi also took a deep breath. A dignified expression appeared on her small face. She rolled up her overly long and wide sleeves and stretched out two small hands. The hand seals also slowly changed. Seeing that Yishi had become serious, Yin Nuashing could only enter a state of cultivation. At the same time, he also paid attention to Yishi. Although he had lent his evil spirit eye to her, he still controlled the output of energy. He had to ensure that his body was full of energy. The secret chamber became quiet once again. Although this place was quiet, the other places had become increasingly chaotic. Within Yuyan City, the friction between the various major forces had become increasingly intense. Within Yuyan City, there were large and small battles happening almost every day. It was somewhat similar to the chaos in Divine Weapon City. The ordinary people in Yuyan City had also been evacuated by Jin Jinwang's group and the people of the Yuyan Pavilion. Those who remained were the original forces of Yuyan City, or those who had rushed over from all over the world. As the ordinary people completely left, the battles in Yuyan City became even more intense. Jin Jinwang's group only shook their heads and sighed in response to this. They did not think about doing anything about it. Even the young Shanming from the Yuyan Pavilion was the same. At this moment, there were many powerful people in Yuyan City. God Kings and God Kings could be seen everywhere. Jin Jinwang estimated that there were at least 100 Shanming experts, and this was only under the condition that everyone was not present yet. As Yin Nuashing and Yi Shi worked on the project, the spies of many large organizations had already been secretly sent out to investigate the ceiling formation in the sky, as well as the traces of other organizations. Even a mountain forest where the Nine Gods Hall had settled down had become extremely busy. Of course, it was not just a single organization that did something like this. As a result, when the two sides met in the sky, another great battle broke out. With the new grievances stacked on top of the old, some organizations almost could not help but declare war. After some calculations, Jin Jinwang and the other God Kings felt that something was amiss. They uprooted the mountain and moved it away overnight. Only when they were 100,000 kilometers away from Yuyan City did they reluctantly put it down. Afterwards, Jin Jinwang went out and even moved the graceful woman called Xiao Xian and Xue Ji's group over. Yin Nuashing only opened his eyes when he saw this. He did not pay too much attention to it. He stared at the four formations between him and Yi Shi. They had completely stabilized now. Under Yi Shi's terrifying control of the soul, the millions of energy patterns began to fuse together rapidly. It seemed like they were almost done. After more than a month had passed, the black symbols began to dim under the gazes of the crowd. At this point in time, a large portion of the symbols had already disappeared. The churning pale purple flame wave behind them clearly appeared in everyone's line of sight. As a matter of fact, they could even feel a wave of scorching heat when they stood before the formation. The huge formation was like a balloon that began to leak. Strands of flames had already spouted out from the cracks. Boom! The undercurrent in Yuyan City continued for around half a month. Yin Nuashing and Yi Shi emerged from a pillar of blue flames, announcing to everyone that they had emerged from seclusion. Under the illumination of the blue light, Jin Jinwang became rather stunned. I'll call you the Heaven Refining Formation. Looking at the pillar of blue flames that soared into the sky and burned the horizon, Yin Nuashing grinned. He looked at Yi Shi, who had fainted after the formation was successfully fused. He also smiled gently and hugged her as they lay down on the side. In just a few days, they arrived at the Yun Nual planet in the blink of an eye. The 2 months that Yu Xian mentioned, when the sun rose, the Gold God King, the Water God King, and the others all opened their eyes at the same time. Several beams of light shot out from the manor. causing the space to ripple. However, they waited from morning until night. They stared until their eyes were sore, but they didn't see the moment the purple night flame erupted. Instead, they saw that the black talismans and formation had already dimmed to a terrifying degree. However, the wave of violet flames behind them had inexplicably calmed down. Even the cracks that occasionally spouted flames had calmed down. Everyone was confused by this strange phenomenon. They didn't know what was going on. If the purple night flame sneezed again, the formation would break, right? Some people couldn't hold back and try to break the formation with their own hands. In the end, the energy they released was reflected back, and they were almost beaten to death. At this point, everyone could only look on helplessly and didn't dare to act recklessly. Under this strange weight, a few days passed in the blink of an eye. Every night, after sending off the blue moon or the red moon and ushering in the morning, an unexpected person appeared in the manner of the Nine Gods' temple. Her red clothes fluttered like fire, and her beautiful hair flowed like a waterfall. Under the setting sun, she looked somewhat divine and ethereal. As soon as she entered, she started playing with Ming and Little Purple Soul. Everyone was dumbfounded. Shuegu and the others were even more surprised. When did such a beautiful person come to the Nine Gods' temple? He had been here for almost 2 months and hadn't seen her before. Shoo, it's about time. Seeing Jin Wang and the others become impatient and hesitant, Yin Nuoshing, how could Xian not know what they were thinking? She raised a slender finger in front of her mouth and pointed at the blue disk that had risen up as if it had been bitten. She smiled mysteriously. Everyone was confused, but seeing Xian and Yuyin reunite after a long time, they couldn't disturb them and could only look on helplessly. This kind of anxiety lasted for about 4 hours. In the manner of the Nine Gods' temple, Xian and Yi Shi, who were sitting cross-legged at the edge of the cliff, suddenly opened their eyes. They raised their heads and looked at the 2 full moons that almost touched the sky. They couldn't help but murmur. In the middle of the moon, 2 moons appear at the same time. The purple night descends. At the same time, the purple night flame at the top of Yuyin City surged wildly. Its brilliant light was like a star, and the broken formation quietly disintegrated under countless shocked gazes. The 2 moons appear at the same time, and the purple night descends. The meaning of the 2 words, purple night descends, was that on this day, the world was its stage. The purple night flame had finally crossed over 60 eras and descended upon the world once again at this moment. Chapter 168. Boom! When the 2 huge moons in the starry sky slowly ascended to the sky, a powerful energy fluctuation suddenly appeared in the sky. Soon after, countless light purple energy mist spread out from the void. Faintly, one could hear the sound of space vibrating as it reverberated between heaven and earth. The atmosphere resonates. The fire element density in this area is rapidly rising. Xian slowly stood up from the edge of the cliff. She lowered her head and looked at the light purple energy mist that filled the sky. She took a breath and felt her lungs burning. She could not help but mutter to herself. Swish! The space beside Xian gently fluctuated while she was muttering to herself. Immediately, a couple of human figures quietly appeared. Within a couple of breaths, they had completely appeared beside Xian. They were the Gold Divine Kings group. Over a dozen people hurriedly ran out from the manor behind them. The fire element density is rising so quickly. The purple night dark flame is coming out. Beside Xian, the fire god king could not help but have a grave expression when he sensed the terrifying fire element density. Xian gently nodded her head. This place was still 100,000 miles away from Yuyin City. However, the rate at which the fire element density soared was not much slower than the center. In less than an hour, there would be countless experts hurrying towards the place where the purple night dark flame would descend. Even though many people knew that they did not have the ability to subdue the purple night dark flame, they still held onto a fluke mentality. After all, if anyone could obtain the purple night dark flame and refine it, their strength would undoubtedly soar by leaps and bounds. At that time, they would be able to easily defeat those who were far stronger than them. For alchemists and blacksmiths, it was a sharp tool that would allow them to rise rapidly in the future. The temptation was not small. When are we leaving? Yaohua could not help but ask, eager to give it a try. Uxin frowned slightly upon hearing this. She shook her head and was just about to speak when her expression suddenly changed. She abruptly lifted her head and looked towards the direction of Yuyin's city in the night sky. An unusually intense light had suddenly been emitted from the distant sky. This kind of light contained an extremely frightening temperature. The pale purple energy ripples spread apart and swiftly rushed past them. No one knew just how large the area it had affected was. Even though they were 50,000 kilometers away, it still caused one to feel a hot feeling surging from the bottom of their hearts. Purple star, the purple night flame has broken its seal. That light was like a light purple star. When Uxin saw that bright light, she sucked in a breath of cold air. The array was already in an extremely fragile state. The purple night flame would only break the seal on the day of the purple night descent, because on this night, when the two moons appeared, the entire world would be its territory. Its energy would be amplified without limit. Boom! The extremely terrifying presence and ripples finally arrived at this moment. The surroundings constantly boomed, and the expressions of the God Kings changed drastically under the terrifying ripples. They hurriedly created a huge barrier of energy, while Uxin, Yi Shi, and the Water God King used their own formations to block the ripples. Just when they were done with their preparations, the terrifying ripples arrived unexpectedly. A deafening roar accompanied by an overclocked shock wave rolled over, making everyone feel as if a huge mountain was slamming down on them. The shock wave lasted for less than a second, but it made everyone groan in unison. The array and barrier were completely shattered. Peak God Emperor! She casually wiped away the bloodstains on the side of her mouth. Her face completely changed when she sensed the terrifying ripples of divinity and energy. She could not help but call out sternly. Their faces twitched a few times. Jin Wang and the others looked at each other. They had been warned by Yi Shi before, but they still could not help but feel shocked when they faced the purple night flame's attack. Go now. Suppressing the churning qi and blood in her body, Uxin's eyes faintly flickered. Just as she said these 3 words in a deep voice, she was stunned. Her eyes were filled with shock as she looked to the front. Her voice was somewhat sharp due to shock. Go to the sky. Don't stop here. As soon as she finished speaking, the golden chains shot out from her sleeves and wrapped around Yuyin and the girls. Light elements surged out of her body, and she suddenly flew into the sky. When Jin Wang and the others saw this, they did not have time to ask why. They grabbed Yaohua, Shuigu, and the others and hurriedly followed, Yin nuashing into the sky. Boom! As soon as they left the mountain, they felt an extremely terrifying heat coming from below. When they lowered their heads, they saw a vast wave of faint purple flames. It was like a curtain of magma that covered the sky and earth. It surged over from afar. In just a few breaths' time, the space beneath their feet was completely devoured. It continued to flow into the distance. Gulp! The monstrous sea of flames raged in the space below. It was only a few hundred meters away from them. If they had been a little slower, it would have been their turn to be devoured. Let's move now. No matter what, let's go to Yuyin City and take a look at the situation. Uxin violently patted her chest. Her face was slightly pale. If she had not kept her evil spirit eye open and saw the faint purple flames rapidly approaching, would she have died here? Jin Wang and the others were stunned. They looked at each other for a while. Soon after, they violently nodded their heads. They turned around and said to Yaohua and the others in a deep voice, "All of you go back first. This trip is dangerous. It's not a joke. We also want to go and take a look. God King, after waiting for so long, at least let us see what the purple night dark flame looks like." When they heard this, Yaohua and the others immediately revealed pitiful expressions. They bitterly begged, causing Jin Wang to lose his temper. Old water, throw them into the spiritual world. Shaking his head, Jin Wang helplessly said to the water god king. Uxin turned her head. Her eyes flickered. She saw the water god king tear open a faint green spatial crack in the space and shove Yao Hua, Shui Gu, and the others into it. She suddenly remembered that Yi Shi's spiritual world was also a spiritual world. However, it had evolved to a higher level. It seemed that only the god of hell could open a spiritual world. Thinking of this, she also let Ming and Little Purple Soul enter Yi Shi's spiritual world. This trip is very dangerous. If you meet any danger that you can't handle, retreat first. Your life is the most important thing. Jin Wang said in a deep voice. They were the elites of the 9 god temples. If their losses were too great, the 9 god temples would also be damaged. If they could snatch it, then snatch it. However, there was no need to make unnecessary sacrifices. In fact, his words were directed at Uxin. Yeah, stop staring at me. When she heard this, Uxin could not help but bitterly smile. If you want to say it, then say it. Why are you all staring at me? Stop talking. You're the only one who likes to cause trouble. Everyone reprimanded her in unison. This made her smile bitterly. Let's go. When he saw this, Jin Wang did not waste any more words. With a wave of his hand, his body turned into a stream of light and rapidly shot out. Then, he shot towards Yuyin City as fast as lightning. Behind him, everyone followed closely. When the 9 god temples began to mobilize, the Sourcepeak region, Ultimate Plane region, and even the Divine Prefecture, all the great sects and forces that receive the news flew over in large groups at this moment. Then, with the whooshing sound of wind breaking, they flew across the sky in batches. Their goal was surprisingly the same. They were all pointing towards the center of the Sourcepeak region. In just half an hour, half of the realm of the gods was in an uproar. Whoosh! In the sky, there was suddenly the sound of wind breaking. A group of figures flew over from the distant horizon. Little Shi, that's the divinity fluctuation of a peak emperor god. Apart from you, who else can sense it? Uxin raised her head and looked into the distance. She hurriedly transmitted her voice. A dazzling purple light was released continuously, like a purple sun. As they got closer and closer, waves of extremely terrifying heat came towards them. Even though other than her and Yuyin, Jin Wang and the others were all underworld gods, they were all sweating profusely. She was currently hiding in Yi Shi's forbidden magic array. As one of the 2 weakest people here, she could not withstand such high temperatures. Damn it, this purple night dark flame is enough to heat me up like a dog. The blue fire is suppressed to the point that it can't come out. Uxin gritted her teeth and sighed heavily. As long as you're a mid-level underworld emperor, you should be able to sense it. However, it won't be very clear. Only high-level underworld emperors or peak underworld emperors will be able to clearly sense the divinity fluctuation of a god emperor. Yi Shi transmitted her voice. Uxin nodded. She turned her head and looked at Jin Wang and the others. However, she sighed. Underworld gods were first-rate experts in the realm of the gods. However, at this level of strength, they could only resist the heat emitted by the purple night dark flame. From this, it could be seen how terrifying the mutated purple night dark flame was. You're worried that someone will notice that something is wrong and report it back. That will attract even more experts? Yi Shi asked softly. Uxin nodded. If someone discovered that the purple night dark flame had the might of a god emperor, there would probably be high-level gods madly rushing over for it. Little Xine, we've seen at least 100 groups of people along the way. This is only 100,000 miles. Looking at the direction they're heading, they're also heading for the purple night dark flame. It looks like this time it's going to be an earth-shattering fight. Yuyin and Mei Mao scanned their surroundings and wiped off their sweat. The fire element in her body had already exceeded the purest level. However, even so, it was still difficult to resist the heat. Uxin smiled bitterly and nodded. Those who would appear on this path at this time were most likely teams with the same goal. However, she did not take it to heart. The strongest among those fellows were only divine underworld powerhouses. The 8 ancient families. I can sense their fluctuations. This fluctuation is the Chi family. Fire God King looked into the distance and suddenly felt something. He immediately said in a low voice, "Let's speed up." Jin Wang nodded and said in a low voice, 100,000 miles was not very far for them. Without Xian's light element, it would only take them half an hour. The two burdens did not fall behind under Yishi's lead. After increasing their speed, Xian and the rest arrived at the location of Yuyan City in about half an hour. Originally, there were lofty mountains outside, but now, when Xian and the rest appeared here again, the lush mountain range that they saw before was nowhere to be seen. There was only a monstrous purple sea of fire that covered the heaven and earth below. A terrifying temperature rose from the sea of fire below, causing the space within 100,000 miles to be in an extremely distorted state. It would shatter with the slightest touch. The mighty sea of fire extends for hundreds of thousands of miles. It's like a flame that can destroy the world. Looking at the huge purple wave that appeared before them, Jin Wang could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. His face was filled with shock. What are you chanting for? What hundreds of thousands of miles? Look at the surging waves. I'm afraid it can extend for millions of miles. The Fire God King rolled his eyes at him. 100 miles in front of them, they could see the purple sea of fire rolling up thousands of zhang-tall fire waves. They splashed on the sea surface and created thousands of layers of massive waves, pushing the sea of fire further away. Every time the sea of fire surged, the scorching temperature would rise and dry people's mouths and tongues. What about Yuyan City? The beautiful woman stared at the sea of fire below, but she could not see any green life aura. She could not help but ask. It should have been destroyed. Xian wiped off her sweat. Yuyan City was at the center of the eruption of the purple night flames. In an instant, they would be engulfed. No matter how powerful the Yuyan Pavilion was, they could not protect Yuyan City. Whoosh whoosh. Not long after Xian and the rest appeared in the sky above the churning waves, waves of rushing wind, sounds were continuously transmitted from all directions. Numerous figures came to a stop far away from the space where the huge waves were crashing against the shore. Their gazes contained some shock as they looked at the purple ocean. All of them knew that before tonight, there was still a city that was filled with life below. I don't think we can pass through. Don't absorb the energy here. It will burn. Fire God King looked at the waves in front of them for a long time and said, Xian, what did you see last time? Jin Wang turned his gaze and asked softly. Little Xian and Shuiji's uncle were shocked as they looked at Xian in shock. She had peeped inside the array before. Xian shook her head. I don't remember how far I saw it the last time. When I crossed it, there were only waves. However, it was not as fierce as it is now. I estimate that we will have to go to the center of Yuyan City to see the purple night flame. The Gold Divine King nodded when he heard this. While they were waiting quietly, the space suddenly wiggled. Soon after, a platform suddenly rushed out from the void. A frightening aura that caused one's expression to change stealthily spread out. Immediately, it attracted all the attention in the area. Under everyone's attentive gazes, numerous gazes looked towards the huge, floating platform. Looking at the few figures on it, their hearts jumped. Emperor of the Underworld. Yishi's pupils constricted as she gazed at the purple-clothed figure at the head of the group. He exuded a terrifying aura. She couldn't help but cry out softly. Chapter 169. A few figures slowly appeared on the floating platform with a group of people standing behind them. As the floating platform was completely revealed from the void, there were actually more than a dozen people on the floating platform. The purple-clothed old man in the lead had a face that did not appear withered. Instead, it was somewhat ruddy and smooth. His snow-white hair draped over his back, making him seem like a crane with white hair and a youthful face. He had his hands behind his back as he calmly looked at the turbulent purple waves. However, It was this seemingly ordinary old man that caused Yishi's expression to become slightly serious. Among the many figures behind the old man, one of them had seen Jin Wang and the others before. It was the young man, Shunming. When they saw the young man, Jin Wang and the others immediately realized who he was. Perhaps he was the pavilion master of the Pavilion of Hidden Flame, an underworld emperor. In the Sourcepeak region, they were a well-deserved first-rate organization. Moreover, the Pavilion of Hidden Flame and Hidden Flame City had both existed since the ancient times. They had existed since the Violet Night Flames had been discovered. Who could say that they did not have some tricks up their sleeves after surviving 3 years? Since the mythological era until now, how many sects had disappeared with the passage of time? And how many had tenaciously survived after the change of era? The 9 divine temples and the 8 ancient families were examples. Now, in the public's knowledge, these 2 were the greatest representatives. They had been passed down from the primordial era until now. Perhaps there were still a few people who remembered that the Serene Flame Pavilion was one of them, Underworld Emperor. Jin Wang and the others were instead relieved when they sensed the person's great strength. It was normal for a first-rate organization that was renowned in the Sourcepeak region to have an underworld emperor. This was still within the range of what they could accept. However, since the Pavilion of Hidden Flame possessed the strength to survive the change of eras, they must have quite the heritage as well. When Jin Wang looked over, the violet-robed old man seemed to sense it as well. He slowly turned his head and looked at Jin Wang with his emotionless eyes. Afterwards, he looked at the God Kings to the side and studied them. However, he did not even glance at Yu Xian and Yishi. He said indifferently, "People of the 9 Divine Hall, Jin Wang and the others have actually brought a child to a place like this. That's the divinity of a peak emperor of the underworld." When that pair of flickering eyes saw Yishi, some ripples surfaced in them. Some graveness also surged into the indifferent voice. However, he furrowed his brows and asked curiously, "But why is your strength only at the ordinary stage? The fluctuation of divinity cannot be concealed. This is indeed the fluctuation of the peak of the Emperor of the Underworld, and it has even come into contact with the level of the Emperor God. However, her strength is indeed only at the ordinary level." The Pavilion Master of the Serene Flame Pavilion said faintly, causing everyone behind him to be confused. Pavilion Master, according to the people from the Soul Lotus sect, a major event happened in Yuyan City a year ago. That underworld emperor participated in it, but he was seriously injured by someone using a divine artifact. When he reappeared, he was already in this state. As for the specifics, they did not say. That young Shiming took a step forward and said in a low voice. Hearing this, the Pavilion Master of the Serene Flame Pavilion nodded slightly and said, "She cut off her own cultivation. Since she has already fallen from the Emperor of the Underworld, there is no need to fear her. We only need to deal with the Purple Night Flame." His voice was very strange. He had always maintained an indifferent tone, which made people feel uncomfortable. It was very strange. "Pavilion Master, you just said that there was a change in the Purple Night Flame." That young Shiming nodded and asked again, "The divinity of an Emperor God. Do you think that the Purple Night Flame, which is ranked 90th, can do this?" The Pavilion Master of the Serene Flame Pavilion raised his head and glanced at him faintly. The light of the purple flame shone on his face. There was no expression on his face, giving people a feeling that his facial features were already stiff. The most eye-catching thing was this person's pair of eyes. His eyes were a violent red, and it was an extremely pure, deep red. In his eyes, the whites of his eyes had turned crimson red, and his pupils were as black as ink. However, there was a small flame burning in the center. Being stared at by those eyes, a violent feeling would rise in one's heart. Emperor God, hearing these 2 words, that young Shiming's hands could not help but tremble slightly. These 2 words represented the peak of strength in the realm of the gods. Only by stepping into the Emperor God level could one stand at the top of the pyramid. In the era where the gods did not appear, the Emperor God level powerhouses were the strongest in the realm of the gods. Being stared at by the pavilion master of the serene flame pavilion, Yishi also felt it. She raised her head and glanced at that person, but she saw that he had already turned his gaze back. She could not help but frown. She also knew that her divinity had been sensed. It was a fluctuation that came from the soul. Only people of her level could sense it, and it was difficult to conceal. Wrinkling her little nose, Yishi transmitted her voice to Yu Exine, around the fifth transformation of the Emperor of the Underworld. How strange. For a force that can cross 20 eras and experience the change of eras, the strongest person should not only have this level of strength. However, looking at the pavilion master of the Serene Flame Pavilion, it seemed that he did not take her seriously. She could not help but sneer in her heart. Her cultivation had indeed dropped, but if he thought that she did not have any tricks up her sleeves, then he would have to pay the price in blood. As a former emperor of the underworld, how could she not have any special tricks up her sleeves? She was also a magic array grandmaster. The power of her soul was strong enough to make up for the loss of her cultivation. That, people of your stage, I don't understand the words you speak. Can you speak human language? Hearing her say a bunch of strange words, Yu Exen rolled her eyes and muttered. Yishi shrugged her shoulders cutely and stuck out her little tongue. She smiled and said, I can't. Yu Exine rolled her eyes at her and immediately turned her gaze to the sea of fire below. She carefully opened her evil spirit eye. Her dazzling eyes looked through the sea of fire and looked down. However, she found that the sea of fire seemed to have turned the entire area from the sky to the ground into a magma area. Below, there were thick and viscous purple flames. The deeper she looked, the darker the flames were. These flames contained the power of the stars. Feeling a mysterious and ethereal energy fluctuation, Yu Xian's eyes flashed slightly. The purple night flame was originally born in the starry sky. It would only descend from the starry sky when it was formed. The purple flames filled the sky like a rain of fire. She did not expect that it would also contain such dense power of the stars. Is this the reason why it wants to break the seal during the purple night? When the two moons appeared at the same time, the power of the stars falling on the god realm would reach its peak. At that time, the strength of the purple night dark flame born in the star field would reach its peak. Yishi said that it already had the divinity fluctuations of a peak god emperor. Coupled with the special characteristics of the divine flame and the special state it was in tonight, it might even be difficult for a newly ascended god rank expert to subdue it. That's not right. Before tonight, the purple night flame seemed to have stopped attacking the seal for a few nights. Uxin felt that something was amiss. However, before she could figure out what was going on, she looked down and saw a transparent barrier. Inside, there were buildings. This caused her eyes to narrow slightly. She lifted her head and saw a huge energy barrier covering Yuyan City, blocking the destructive flames. Yuyan City is still there. It's the energy fluctuation of the Emperor of the Underworld. After sensing it for a while, Yu Exine knew that the pavilion master of the Yuyan Pavilion must have set up something to protect Yuyan City. She glanced around, but did not see anyone. It seemed that Yuyan City had become an empty city. Those experts were all gone. She did not know if they had escaped before the purple night flame erupted, or if they had not escaped in time and were burned to ashes. Yu Exane stared at the sea of fire for a long time. In the end, she could not stand the heat and quickly closed her evil spirit eye. It was at this moment that she heard a loud sound of wind breaking. She saw a huge lotus riding on the waves of fire and quickly passing through the sea of fire below. The splashing waves of fire were pushed far away. In the blink of an eye, it had rushed to the side of the group of people from the Yuyan Pavilion. Aha, Brother Fu Bin, you're finally back. When Yu Xin looked towards the direction of the lotus flower, several figures also appeared on the lotus flower. A trace of astonishment flashed through her eyes. The person who spoke on the lotus flower was actually someone she had seen before. It was the man who had fought against Yi Shi that night. The man who had used 2 lotus divine artifacts and the man who had used the man-made red lotus karmic fire. He was an extremely powerful divine underworld expert. He's also an emperor of the underworld. The one that day was just a clone. Seeing that she was stunned, Yishi added, which made her suck in a breath of cold air. 2 underworld emperors. It seemed that the Serene Flame Pavilion and the Soul Lotus sect had already come to an agreement. Destroy the hypocritical group and expose the real group. Yishi smiled and whispered, "Do you understand now, my dear sister Wu Yuansu?" Uxian rolled her eyes and looked behind the youth. As expected, she saw a few people who had fought with him on the platform that night. In other words, Yishi had already known that the people on the platform were not from the Yuyan Pavilion. It was just that the people from the Yuyan Pavilion had returned later. So, what's your purpose, my lovely Xiaoxi? If you say it's a joke, I'm going to spank your little butt. Uxian's face twitched a few times. She took a deep breath and calmly transmitted her voice. I originally wanted to tell others that the Soul Lotus sect and the Yuyan Pavilion had joined hands to create trouble. I didn't expect that not many people would notice it. Even if one person knew about it and exposed it, even if Sister Lu, you didn't take action that day, we wouldn't be able to continue playing and would retreat. I didn't expect that the people in the Yuyan city were so stupid. Yishi stuck out her tongue. She didn't expect that no one in the Yuyan city knew the people from the Soul Lotus sect. If you had spread the message that day, I'm afraid that it wouldn't be just 2 Emperor of the Underworld experts that came today. It would be a group of Emperor of the Underworld experts and even Emperor God experts. Uxian rolled her eyes. If someone knew that the 2 first-rate forces had joined hands just for the Purple Night Dark Flame, they would be able to see that there was something wrong with the Purple Night Dark Flame. They would be more vigilant. Then, the number of experts that came today would be more than just a few. At that time, I didn't expect that the Purple Night Dark Flame would mutate. Yishi poked her little finger and said in a sweet voice. Uxian was completely speechless. Guiju, when I wasn't here, thank you for guarding the Yuyan city. The pavilion master of the Yuyan Pavilion was slightly stunned. He looked towards the direction of the voice and saw that the person from the Soul Lotus sect was riding the huge lotus and landed on their platform. His voice contained a hint of a smile. The Soul Lotus sect elders by the name of Guiju waved his hand and said with a smile, "I have only sent a clone over." The sect elders of the Soul Lotus sect are all extremely stubborn. I was unable to persuade them. Thus, I could only come here myself. The pavilion master of the Yuyan Pavilion rolled his eyes at him. Then, he looked at Yishi and said softly, "That girl, who is she?" Guiju was also stunned. Soon after, he turned his gaze around. When he saw Yishi, he knew what Yishi was talking about and told her everything that had happened that night. Fortunately, his clone was destroyed when he detonated the Soul Lotus. So he didn't know that Yin Nuoxing had used the Linghong sword. Even the pavilion master of the Yuyan Pavilion didn't receive the complete information. Abyssal Shrine. After hearing Guoju's words, the pavilion master of the Yuyan Pavilion looked a little solemn. However, not long after, the young man said, "Pavilion master, I heard that the girl left the Abyssal Shrine after her cultivation fell. Then, she followed the people of the 9 Shrine. We didn't see any experts coming to the Yuyan city." Hearing this, the pavilion master of the Yuyan Pavilion nodded. His eyes that were dyed with flames looked at the waves and became calm again. Chapter 170. As time went by, more and more people came from afar. Uxian withdrew her attention and glanced at the people around her. She realized that no matter if it was the Soul Lotus sect or the other forces, there were only 4 or 5 people. She suddenly said, "There don't seem to be many people from each force. Other than the Serene Flame Pavilion, there are only 4 or 5 people from the other forces. Subduing the Purple Night Flame doesn't depend on the number of people. After 60 eras of operation by the Purple Night Flame, this sealed land has become a tiger's den. Even if an expert from the underworld god realm enters, he can only barely protect himself. From the moment we entered this sea of fire, the battle horn has been blown." Jin Jinwang's golden eyes looked around and smiled. "Then why aren't they going over?" Uxian scratched her head. The place where the huge wave hit and splashed water was still a long way from here. She guessed that it was only officially close to the purple night flame. They are waiting. They are waiting for the sealing power in this area to completely fade away before they enter. Although the sealing array has been broken, there is still a huge amount of sealing power left in this space. If they rush in rashly, they will probably be suppressed. At that time, they will have already entered the central area. I don't know what will happen when they are suppressed, but I won't say it to scare the children. The gold god king grinned. No wonder. Uxin stuck out her tongue. She almost couldn't wait to rush in. However, they won't have to wait for long. After a while, they will enter no matter how dangerous it is. Hearing this, the fire god king sighed. What? Uxin was stunned. The eruption of the purple night flame. Although there are only so many people here, but... Haha, those old monsters must be watching this place. Speaking of this, the fire god king raised his head and looked at the empty void with a strange look. It was as if someone was watching there. Furthermore, based on the speed at which the purple night dark flame is spreading, it won't be long before news of it reaches us. When that happens, the emperor of the underworld, or even the god emperors who have sensed the strange undulations, will probably rush over like ducks. Jin Wang said faintly. At that time, the opportunity will be given to those stronger forces. The Serene Flame Pavilion has waited for the purple night flame for 60 years. Do you think they will sit by and do nothing when others take it away? Hearing this, Uxin stuck out her tongue. The purple night flame was much stronger than they had imagined. Her eyes flickered slightly, and she muttered in her heart, the strength of a peak emperor god. No matter who subdues it, it will be a great help. If it's just the emperor of the underworld, it will be difficult to subdue it. However, this should be beyond the expectations of those people from the Serene Flame Pavilion. The people from the Serene Flame Pavilion had guarded the purple night flame for 60 years. They must have known that there was a mutation in the purple night flame. However, they should have never thought that it would mutate to this extent. Otherwise, the pavilion master would not be just an emperor of the underworld expert, but an emperor god expert. However, they could only make the best of it and bite the bullet. If they waited any longer, the opportunity would probably change hands. Qi Yao, did the Qi clan send him out? Just as Uxin was thinking, Jin Wang suddenly turned his gaze to the other side and muttered. Upon hearing this, Uxin's eyes followed the direction he was looking at and looked over. She saw 3 men in gray robes standing at the other end of the sea of fire. That place was much more empty and was located in a corner. It was difficult to attract anyone's attention. The somewhat extraordinary decorations were somewhat familiar when they entered her eyes, causing her to recall that she had met the members of the Qi clan back when she was still in Star Spirit City. Luckily, they're only gods, so they shouldn't be able to sense the ripples. However, when they enter, they should be able to feel the terror of the divine flame. If the purple night flame doesn't seal the space and let them send a message back, the experts of the Qi family should be here in less than 2 hours, the Golden God King said softly. Only 2 hours? Hearing this announcement, Uxin could not help but frown. Suddenly, she thought of something and said softly, didn't the 9 God Temple send a message back to ask for reinforcements? They did. However, most of the experts from the 9 God Temple have gone to travel or are in seclusion. Without the orders of the Great Elder or the Temple Master, no one can be called back. Even if they are called back, it will take a long time. The Light God Temple is too arrogant and cannot ask for reinforcements. The Temple Master and the others will not be able to appear. Hearing this, Jin Wang could not help but complain. His pounding of his chest and stamping his feet made Uxin speechless. He was so resentful. So, we're the 9 God Temple's strongest force. The beautiful woman patted her head and sighed. Heavens! Uxin didn't know whether to laugh or cry. How could the famous transcendent power of the myriad god realm be like this? Her fantasy was completely shattered. She had thought that 9 deities temple would take advantage of this opportunity and invite a 1,000,000-strong army to directly take over the purple night dark flame. Seeing her disappointed expression, the beautiful woman and the others smiled bitterly. They didn't want this to happen either. The experts of the Nine Deities Temple seemed to have inherited the unrestrained nature of their primogenitor. Other than the temple master, the great elder, and a few others, they didn't even know when the others went missing. However, the other families will probably be absent. Other than the chief family, most of them are in seclusion. Although there are signs of activity in the outside world, the scale is not large. Therefore, the Purple Night Dark Flame will not participate this time. Jin Wang said after looking around. Now, let's wait for the best time to enter the space and see if we can subdue the Purple Night Dark Flame. With the arrival of the Purple Night Dark Flame, its aura seems to be getting stronger and stronger. Thunder God King sighed and crossed his arms. He raised his head and looked at the place where the waves were surging. Xian's gaze wandered around. When she saw those experts, she would ask Shi to tell her their strength. Most of them were divine realm experts. There were at least 200 to 300 of them. As for those above divine realm, there were dozens of them. It seemed like there was only her and Yuan, the 2 mortal realm experts. If it was not for Xianyin, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to touch this level of matter. Xian's finger gently stroked the ring on her left hand. The uneasiness in her heart gradually calmed down. Every time she thought of this, she would feel that this world was very interesting. She also felt guilty and wanted to find her previous self. However, this matter was not so simple. Frighteningly high temperature. Wave after wave of purple-colored energy ripples continuously spread out from the depths of the sea of flames. The pale purple-colored fire waves overlapped each other, and the frequency also became increasingly high. In the end, it was as though there was a 10,000 feet large wave that continuously slammed against the surface of the sea as this purple-colored sea gradually turned berserk. The sound of rushing wind in the surroundings also became more and more frequent. More and more experts were attracted by this strange phenomenon. Therefore, in a short half an hour, the purple-colored sea of flames in the sky was densely packed with many figures. However, most of these figures stopped at a place extremely far away from the waves. Only those true experts dared to approach within a 10,000 feet radius of the waves like Jin Wang and the rest. Among those figures that were rushing over, Xian also saw some people who had enmity towards Yin Nuoxing. She could not help but rejoice that she did not come in person today. With the flow of time, when almost all those who had seen Yin Nuoxing had arrived, the sound of rushing wind was once again transmitted from the horizon. This rushing wind sound actually contained a little metallic stench. Some people even felt that the weapons hanging on their bodies were acting strangely. The sacred weapon of Ein Hall is really late. Jin Wang and the rest slowly turned their gazes over when they sensed this unique ripple. Under their gazes, a ripple was emitted from the distant space. Soon after, 9 figures rushed out. With a gentle shake, they appeared in this place in front of everyone's eyes. They had already met the 8 people who had arrived and even fought with them. Only the leader appeared somewhat unfamiliar. He was wearing a black robe that had a faint metallic luster flowing over it. His eyes were slightly narrowed and occasionally a sharp glint flashed across them. Jin Wang's gaze swept over King Shengluo. He was not surprised. When they had fought in Constellation City, he knew that King Shengluo was only an avatar that had borrowed the power of a divine weapon. After which, he turned his gaze towards the leader and could not help but frown. I was wondering why we were late. It turns out that you have sent reinforcements. What level of expert is this? Xian could not help but sigh when she heard Jin Wang's tone and expression. It seemed that another batch of experts had arrived. It was really lively today. She wondered what level of expert they were. Underworld, King Expert. Before Jin Wang could speak, he heard Shi's indifferent voice. However, her voice became more and more solemn. There were too many variables that had appeared, and it was no longer within their control. This fight might be exceptionally difficult. It's okay. After all, we are not the ones who are fighting. The Serene Flame Pavilion should be the ones who are anxious. If anything goes wrong, I will find an opportunity to use the light element to snatch it and run away. Uxin said with a smile. A underworld emperor expert who specializes in speed can catch up with a half-baked light element like you. Yishi rolled her eyes at her. When one's strength reached the level of the underworld emperor, every part of their body had been transformed. They had already thrown away most of their mortal nature. Whether it was their body, soul, or spirit, they were all closer to divinity. They could no longer be looked at with ordinary eyes. Uxin was stunned for a moment. Then she smiled bitterly. She had underestimated the gods. According to the Golden God King, even if one had a monstrous talent to cultivate to the level of a god, it would take at least 100,000 years, or even a few 100,000 years. Those were already old demons, although according to their own age, they were still in their youth, or even in their infancy. Old Yao, that bastard, why did he disappear? If he was still here, everything would be much easier. Even a person from the Light Temple would be fine. Jin Wang muttered and suddenly scolded in exasperation. The soles of his feet could not help but stomp on the void. This made everyone blush with shame. Even Yao Hua and Shui Guo, who were in the spiritual world of the Water God King, could not help but be speechless when they saw this. This appeared. Uxin glanced at him and sighed. It's just a small matter in the Light Temple. Don't bother with that old guy. He has been nagging about it for tens of thousands of years. The beautiful woman smiled and waved her hand. Uxin was tactful and did not pursue the matter. Since it was a matter in the Light Temple, it was not appropriate for her to pursue it. As more and more people arrived, the attention of the crowd, who had quietened down, returned to the distant space where the waves were surging. The waves were surging more ferociously, and the momentum was many times greater than before. In fact, the place where the waves were surging was much further away. The people from a serene flame pavilion and Jin Shenwang had no choice but to retreat a little. The sea of fire under the moonlight was a little calmer in the distance. Looking down, one could even see the shadows of the two huge round plates. Puff! This wait continued for about 3 hours. The surging waves also slowly became smaller from the previous 1,000 feet. In the end, it was only a few hundred feet. Vaguely, a strange sound could be heard. It seemed like someone was humming a song from the depths of the sea of fire. As the waves weakened, the pushing force of the sea also weakened a lot. The purple sea below gradually calmed down. When the waves shrunk to about 1,000 feet wide, the violent waves actually became a lot more docile. There were no longer any big waves, and they only gently pushed the sea of fire out. At the moment when the waves calmed down, all the experts suddenly opened their eyes. They could feel that the temperature of the world had increased by more than 1,000 times in an instant. The Fire God King also opened his eyes at this moment. A wisp of fire covered Yu'in and Uxin as he said in a deep voice, "It's time." These words of his seemed to possess a kind of magical power. Rushing wind sounds were immediately emitted from the surrounding space the moment they were spat out. Numerous powerful figures rushed over from the distance with lightning-like speed. They directly charged into the depths of the sea of fire amidst numerous whistling sounds. Seeing this scene, Uxin also suddenly stood up. Her dazzling eyes flickered with excitement. The purple night flame. After more than a year, she was finally going to see it. Chapter 171. Yua. The temperature outside is already close to the temperature of the sun. Yishi's forbidden array, Fire God King's fire barrier, and the divine artifact's energy barrier, all 3 layers of protection, Uxin still felt unbearably hot. Large droplets of sweat rolled down her forehead, and the fire element in her body was even rioting because of the temperature here. Yu'in was not much better off. Both of them were at the mortal stage, and the temperature here was enough to evaporate them in an instant. Not even a trace of them would be left. If even we can't take it, how much better can you 2 brats be? Fire God King turned his head, rolled his eyes, and said to Uxin and Uxin when he saw the figures swarming into the depths of the sea of fire. Jin Wang exhaled a mouthful of hot air. He felt a little thirsty, so he wiped his sweat and asked, "How about it? Are you going to give up?" Hearing this, Uxian was silent for a moment. She stared blankly ahead. People kept flying past her, and even the wind that hit her body was scorching hot. It was so hot that she felt uncomfortable. After a moment, she gritted her teeth and nodded fiercely. Phew! Seeing her nod, Jin Wang and the rest breathed a sigh of relief. It was already very difficult for them to stay at the periphery of the sea of fire. If they went deeper, they did not know what would happen to them. Senior God King, if we go deeper, can you withstand it? Just as everyone was preparing to return home, Uxian suddenly asked, startling Jin Wang and the rest. Their hearts could not help but beat faster. Was this girl still going in? Looking at each other, Jin Wang nodded and said, "We can withstand it, but only barely. If others attack us, we might not be able to withstand it. We are not in our best condition now." Hearing this, Uxian lightly nodded. She looked around and found that almost everyone had gone in. Only her group of people were still standing outside in a daze. Her face revealed a hint of a bitter smile. She was even a bit unhappy. Her brows wrinkled very ugly. In the end, she fiercely sighed. Everyone saw her face constantly changing, as if she was changing her face. They were all stunned. What was this girl trying to do? Sigh, I really can't bear to use it. If I use one, I'll have one less. I'll lose weight. Uxian fiercely clenched her teeth. Her right hand trembled as she caressed the silver-white ring on her left hand. With a thought, a white light flashed. Soon after, everyone saw a jade bottle appear in her hand. Along with it was a vast and boundless energy. A medicinal fragrance that was so rich that it could not be dispersed drifted across the world. It was accompanied by an ice-cold aura, causing Jin Wang and the rest to feel that the air was no longer as hot as it was when they took a whiff. Medicinal pills? Jin Wang and the others were startled, and their pupils shrank. What level of medicinal pill could make them feel intoxicated with just a whiff of its fragrance? Seeing the jade bottle, Yuyin immediately understood. Among the people present, she was the only one who had seen Xianyin. That was an extremely mysterious and powerful existence to her. Little Xian was going to use the treasure that Xianyin had left for her. For the purple night dark flame, there's no other way. Bitterly smiling as she bit her lips, Uxian gently pulled out the lid of the jade bottle. Soon after, she tilted the bottle, and an ice-blue medicinal pill slowly rolled out from the jade bottle. Roar! The medicinal pill was only the size of a thumb, and its surface was covered with 8 different colored patterns. When it rolled out, it floated a meter in front of Uxian. An astonishing medicinal fragrance spread across the sky, bringing with it an ice-cold aura. As it hovered in the sky, it actually caused the space to fluctuate. It condensed into various beast shapes, and all of them were roaring towards the sky. It was formed by aura, but there really was a roar coming from it. It also brought with it the unique pressure of the beast, causing everyone's legs to go soft. This is formed by spiritual qi. There's also life energy fluctuations. The beautiful woman cultivated the wood element and was extremely sensitive to the aura of life. As soon as this energy appeared, the wood element in her body began to boil. That vast life force made her suck in a breath of cold air. This elixir has life force. This sentence shocked everyone, including Uxian, who had taken out the medicinal pill. She also knew that there were some high-level medicinal pills that were formed by gathering spiritual qi and condensing life energy. They could become living beings, but those medicinal pills were unimaginably high level. Uxian and Yuyin were still fine, as they knew that Xianyin wasn't an ordinary person. However, when they heard the beautiful woman's shocked cry, their hearts couldn't help but beat violently. Yishi had also taken the elixir that Uxian had used to save her, so she wasn't as shocked as the others. However, she was still shocked. In the outside world, the gods couldn't get their hands on this elixir even if they tried their best. However, the latter kept taking it out like it was beans, which made her a little numb. 8 colored pill veins. An 8 elemental medicinal pill that can form life energy. What level is it? Jin Wang stared at the medicinal pill with his dead fish eyes. The energy that had condensed into the pill spirit was so heavy that it caused the space to distort. Those strange beasts were vivid and lifelike. There's also an energy seal. If it wasn't for this reason, I'm afraid that the energy fluctuations that have been released just now would have made those who rushed into the depths of the sea of fire to turn back and kill them. The Water God King looked at the medicinal pill that was only the size of a thumb. It was emitting a vast amount of energy, but it was even more powerful than their peak state. He couldn't help but swallow his saliva. Buzz! Just when everyone was absent-minded because of the strange phenomenon in the sky, suddenly, those strange beasts that were condensed from the medicinal pill's aura dissipated into an aura that contained terrifying energy. After that, they condensed on the medicinal pill. A bone-chilling aura was emitted from it, and the space seemed to be frozen. Even the calm sea of fire below was completely calm like the surface of a lake. Hiss! The sudden change from an extremely hot state to a bone-chilling cold caused everyone to fiercely shiver. The temperature here was comparable to the temperature of the sun. Just a small medicinal pill that came out was able to melt the heat. The surging spiritual energy and life energy wriggled on the medicinal pill for a moment. After that, it slowly changed. Under everyone's astonished gaze, it turned into a palm-sized ice blue person. That vast amount of energy also disappeared in an instant. Although the energy had disappeared, the cold air had turned the space within 100 feet into an ice blue color. The small person only had a vague human shape. One could clearly see its facial features, but it was just a glowing object. From the long hair and the small outline of the human shape, it should be a girl. However, the medicinal pill didn't have a gender distinction. Around the small person, one could see a circle of black runes that formed a ring. It seemed to be the energy seal. After the small ice blue person transformed, it used its hands to rub its eyes, as if it had just woken up. Soon after, it looked at Yuexin, tilted its head, and stared straight at her. Yuexin also tilted her head. This medicinal pill had already transformed into a human shape, and it was filled with spirituality. If it wasn't for Xian Yin's energy seal, it would have already escaped, right? However, this human-shaped medicinal pill, how could it be eaten? The small person formed by the ice-cold medicinal pill blinked its eyes and looked at the others. It looked around and looked at Yuyin for a while longer. It opened its mouth and let out a long yawn before looking back at Yuexin. Soon after, it slowly floated up. However, unexpectedly, it didn't fly towards the ladder. Instead, it flew towards Yuyin. The sudden change stunned Yuyin. Just as she was about to retreat, Yuexin pulled her back. Mei Mao also flashed for a while and looked at Yuexin hesitantly. Seeing that Yuexin nodded, she nodded her head. Looking at the small person flying towards her, the small person stretched out an arm that was as thin as a match. A finger-like thing protruded from the small fist and gently pressed on Yuyin's head. Just as the finger pressed on her forehead, Yuyin felt an extremely cold aura enter her brain. It gave her a fright. Just as she was about to use her energy to resist, she felt that after the cold aura entered her body, it gradually became gentle, giving her a warm feeling. Buzz! Not long later, the little icy blue person released its finger. Everyone hurriedly looked over, only to see that there was an additional little blue dot on Yuyin's forehead. A strange, icy aura hovered around her body, just like the Yuan power protecting her body. One could even feel that the aura circulating within her body was tainted with bits of icy cold intent, yet it also carried the blazing sensation of fire element. This strange phenomenon of ice and fire, circulating at the same time, caused everyone to exclaim in admiration. This was the first time they had seen a medicinal pill of this grade. The heat in her body gradually disappeared until she could no longer feel the heat from the outside world. She only felt that her body was warm and had reached a comfortable equilibrium. Idiot, you let me use it. What are you going to do? However, Yuyin was unable to feel excited. How could such a precious medicinal pill be given to her just like that? Was this ice blue medicinal pill an idiot? She was not the one who had taken it out. Uxin smiled bitterly and shook her head. That medicinal pill was chosen by itself. Could it be that it could not be forced? Its spirituality was so abundant that it had already given birth to its own intelligence. How it chose was its own problem. However, this sounded strange. If it was like this, then wouldn't those people who worked so hard to refine the medicinal pills still have to rely on fate to take the pills? She felt like she was being sucked in, but very quickly, she knew that she was wrong, because she saw the little ice blue person open its mouth and let out a squeak. Then, it slowly walked to Uxion's chest and patted her chest with its tiny palm. Then, under everyone's stunned gazes, it entered her heart. Uxion opened her mouth and patted her chest with her palm. She looked in front of her with a strange expression. Then, she closed her eyes and sank her consciousness into her body. She saw that the little ice blue person was standing in her heart beside the swirling zither. It stretched its body and then lay down. Lie down. Lie down. Uxion was dumbfounded as she pointed at her chest and stammered. Just as she finished speaking, she saw a blue light flow out of her body. Then, a thin blue energy barrier formed on the surface of her body. It was so thin that it was as thick as a piece of paper. If one did not look closely, they would not be able to see it. However, the light flowing on it did not seem to melt no matter how hot it was. Moreover, it was not just on the outside. Even the inside of her body was covered by this thin energy barrier. Uxion's eyes were surprised as she looked at the energy barrier that had appeared on her body. She did not feel as hot as before. A thought passed through her mind, and she involuntarily smiled. She looked at the 3 layers of energy barrier 5 feet around her and carefully extended her hand. Careful, seeing that she was about to touch the energy barrier, the beautiful woman jumped in fright and hurriedly pressed her hand down. However, just as her hand touched the barrier, she felt a cold aura from her palm. She cried out in surprise and quickly flung her hand away. Senior Divine King, I don't think there's a problem with me. Uxion turned around and smiled. Soon after, under the nervous gazes of the crowd, she stepped out of the energy barrier. Immediately, waves of heat pounced over like hungry wolves and tigers that had seen a delicious meal. However, when the scorching aura came into contact with the thin energy barrier, the temperature dropped in an instant. It turned into a warm breeze that felt very comfortable as it brushed against her body. Uxion could no longer feel the scorching wind blowing against her face. She couldn't help but smile sweetly and even twirl in the air. Her joyful appearance made everyone forget where they were for a moment. Seeing that she was not sweating at all while they were covered in sweat, Jin Wang could not help but laugh bitterly. Looking at Uxion, his heart also felt a little hot. However, that feeling only lasted for a moment before it disappeared. From the looks of it, her parents seemed to have left something for her. Of course, Jin Wang and the others did not know that it was not left behind by her parents. It was left behind by her younger sister. Chapter 172. Suddenly, there was a gust of wind in the empty sky. Shifting their gazes, they saw Uxion and Jin Wang's group hurriedly flying through the sky. The purple sea reflected their figures. After they charged into the sea of fire, the entire purple sea seemed to have calmed down. Occasionally, there would only be some small waves. However, the pure heat had increased by over 1,000 times, causing Jin Wang's group to be completely drenched. On the other hand, the two in the middle did not have a single drop of sweat. If one looked carefully, one could even see a thin layer of light on their bodies that kept all the heat out. Everyone was very curious about the scene of the pill sealing the space. They were impatient to ask about it. However, in the end, when the words rose up in their throats, they only weakly swallowed them back down. Everyone had a tacit understanding to avoid talking about it. I stayed for a while just now. I wonder where those people went. Uxion involuntarily knitted her brows as she gazed at the empty sea surface. The direction they were heading in seemed to be the last group. Occasionally, she could also sense other auras sweeping past from other places, all heading towards the depths of the Sea of Fire. It seemed that they were not the only group that had gathered here. Other groups had likely gathered in other areas around Yiyan City. Their direction was the same, but they had set off from different places. Senior God King, do you hear a song? The moment the Sea of Fire calmed down, Yuxin heard an indistinct humming sound. She could vaguely feel that it came from the depths of the Sea of Fire. She didn't know if it was someone else humming or where it came from, because this humming sound seemed to be coming from the Sea of Fire below. It also seemed to be coming from the stars in the sky. I heard it. It's very clear, but I can't catch it. Jin Jinwang nodded. It was not her misperception. They had also heard it clearly. They subconsciously flew towards the direction of the sound, but they could not find the direction. Yuxin nodded. She could not catch it either, but she could hear it. She looked inside her body. At her heart, the little ice-blue person was quietly lying there. Its breathing was even and weak, as if it had fallen asleep. The ice-cold aura that filled her body was continuously being emitted by this little fellow. Even so, she did not see the little fellow become weak or disappear. It was different from the pills she knew. Perhaps even the method of consumption was different. Puffed. Looking at it sleeping, it even rubbed its butt and stomach. Occasionally, it would even turn its body. That cute sleeping posture made Yuxin unable to hold back her laughter. This caused everyone to be stunned. They looked at each other in dismay and were all confused. Let's speed up. I have a bad premonition. The Gold Divine King muttered to himself for a while before he spoke in a serious tone. Soon after, the tip of his foot pushed off the empty space and his body shot out. Behind him, everyone nodded and sped up. Everyone quickly flew over the Sea of Fire. Even though they were Shanming experts and had the protection of Yishi's forbidden array, they still felt waves of stinging pain on their skin from the terrifying heat that spread out in all directions. In this endless space of flames, even air had been completely evaporated. An indescribably desolate and monotonous smell filled the space. Everyone flew forward for nearly 10 minutes. However, as they continued to fly, Jin Jinwang's expression gradually turned ugly. During this 10-minute journey, their flying speed was close to rapid. They should have been able to catch up with the last group. However, the Sea of Fire still had no end, and they did not see any figures. It was as if this Sea of Fire was endless. The temperature of the space is gradually rising. This means that we are not in the wrong place. However, why can't we see anyone? The change in the temperature of the space caused Jin Jinwang to feel as though he was in a furnace that was continuously heating up. His eyes swiftly swept around. However, other than the purple sea of fire and the occasional small sea waves, he could not see anything else. This space was filled with a pale purple flame. The frightening temperature caused his blood to boil. Slap! A clear slap sound was suddenly transmitted. Everyone hurriedly turned their heads, only to see Lei Shunwang violently slapping himself. His face had turned red, causing them to be stunned. I can feel pain. This is not a dream. Lei Shunwang rubbed the red spot on his face and laughed foolishly, causing everyone to helplessly shake their heads. Hearing that, Yishi came back to her senses. Her hands formed a seal with lightning speed, and the black forbidden formation under her feet also squirmed in the instant her hand seals changed. A moment later, it suddenly expanded, and a dark light enveloped them. They could also feel waves of soul-probing power sweeping through the space. This is not an illusion array. There is no such fluctuation. A moment later, Yishi shook her head. She was in control of a huge illusion array. Hence, she was very clear about the fluctuation of an illusion array. However, she could not sense any such fluctuation in this place. Exactly how big is this damn space? We did not sense any fluctuation of spatial teleportation. Fire Shenwang tightly knitted his brows. His face was filled with thoughts and bewilderment. Yuxin had also quietly opened her evil spirit eye. However, she did not see anything. The humming that had been reverberating in her ears caused her to frown. She felt that there was something wrong with the humming. However, no matter how the few of them tried to detect it, they could not find any problem. Big sister, close your eyes and listen to this humming. That way, you will be able to find the path to the purple night flame. Just when Uxin was a little bewildered, a voice flowed into her ears like a stream, causing her to be stunned. This was the voice of little purple soul. Find it? Uxin scratched her head. However, she still did as she was told. She closed her eyes and took a few deep breaths to calm herself down. She emptied her mind. The sound of the wind, breathing, heartbeat, the rolling of the sea of fire, the buzzing of the space, the voices of Jin Wang and the others, and that crisp humming sound, they all merged into one. Quiet. She repeated it in her heart. She took a deep breath and exhaled. After repeating it a few times, the sounds that reverberated in Uxin's ears gradually faded and disappeared. Finally, she locked onto that humming sound. She closed her eyes tightly. She seemed to be standing in a dark place, just like when she entered the song of death. Gradually, the sounds in her body became weaker. That humming sound was amplified by her. The humming sound that reverberated in the sea of fire gradually became louder. Ding! A formless sound wave suddenly came from the space, causing the sea of fire to fluctuate a little. It actually resonated with the sea of fire, causing the sound to surge out endlessly. When an invisible sound wave passed through Uxin's body, she suddenly opened her eyes. Two dazzling golden lights shot out from her eyes. That dazzling golden light caused the Gold Divine King and the others to be startled. They turned around and saw that Uxin's eyes were wide open. She was staring in a direction to her, right in a daze. This way, let's go, Uxin softly shouted. She grabbed Yuin and Yi Shi and quickly flew in the direction she was looking at. Jin Wang and the others were stunned. They scratched the back of their heads in confusion. However, before they could ask anything, they waved their sleeves and hurriedly followed. Uxin flew forward for nearly 10 minutes. The doubts in her heart grew stronger and stronger. Finally, at the 20-minute mark, her body seemed to have been nailed into the air as she suddenly stopped. This caused Jin Wang and the others who were following behind her to wipe off their sweat. They looked at her in confusion. Wasn't she in a hurry just a moment ago? Why did she stop? Uxin waved her hand to get everyone to quiet down. She took a deep breath and closed her eyes. Just like before, she once again captured that humming sound. However, her expression changed slightly. Why did the direction of the humming sound change? To the left. Her eyes looked strangely to the left. Uxin sighed and shook her head. If she couldn't figure it out, then she would go and see for herself. Seeing her close her eyes for a moment and fly up in a hurry again, but in a different direction, Jin Wang and the others seemed to have understood something. However, they were still a little confused and hurriedly followed her. After flying like this for a few minutes, Uxin suddenly stopped. She looked around and closed her eyes again. After a moment, she flew out again. Jin Wang and the others hurriedly followed. After a few sudden stops and turns, the God Kings seemed to have understood something. They could feel that the surrounding temperature was quietly rising. However, with Yi Shi, the Fire God King, and the Water God King around, the temperature couldn't do anything to them for a while. There's someone. After dozens of turns, they finally saw someone. Jin Wang's gaze stopped at the sea of fire. However, what he saw was a corpse floating on the sea of fire. It was being pushed away by the waves. The breath in the body had been burned away long ago. However, the body was not burning. The divine God has lost his vitality. Even his soul has been burnt into nothingness. The beautiful woman said in a grave voice as her beautiful eyes looked at the corpse that was drifting further and further away. This caused a few of them to be even more vigilant. After walking for half an hour, they finally saw a person. However, it was a corpse. Moreover, the way it died was a little strange. Is it really okay to continue walking like this? Fire God King gasped for breath and looked at Uxin. He couldn't help but ask. Hearing this, Uxin raised her gaze and looked in another direction. She paused for a moment and then turned to Fire God King. She shook her head and said, I don't know. I'm just following my gut feeling. However, since I saw someone, I should be going in the right direction. Jin Wang and the others nodded. Since they could see someone, there should be no problem with the direction. Let's speed up. We still haven't seen the people from Hidden Flame Pavilion. They might have already arrived. Thunder God King said in a deep voice. Uxian nodded. She turned her head and looked at the place where the corpse disappeared. She took a deep breath and then looked forward. Just when she was about to rush out, a feeling that made her heart palpitate suddenly surged in her heart. Be careful! With a shout, Uxian pushed Yuin and Yishi away with both hands. Weak wind elements quickly gathered. Just when she was about to retreat, the sea of fire under her feet suddenly boiled. A huge flame pillar rushed out of the sea of fire without any warning. It directly engulfed Uxian's body and rushed up to the sky. Little Xian. All of a sudden, she was pushed far away. When she turned her head, she saw the scene that shattered her heart. However, before she could react, she saw a fiery red figure rushing out of the flame pillar. The figure's body was filled with cold air. It almost froze the space. I'm fine. Uxian shook her head. She looked at the sea of fire below with lingering fear. It was the human-shaped elixir in her heart that saved her life. The eruption of the flame was too sudden. The unexpected eruption of the flame could even kill a god, let alone her. Let's go. Be careful. I feel that we are close to the center. The singing is closer to us. Uxian turned her head and said to everyone with a serious expression. Chapter 173. Above the desolate purple sea of fire, a few figures flew past. The cold wind created waves in the sea of fire. The cold aura caused many small ice crystals to condense in the air. When the cold subsided, they were melted by the surrounding high temperature. The sound of wind breaking suddenly stopped. A few figures came to an abrupt stop in the air. The abrupt stop compressed the air into a giant cannon and blasted the sea of fire below. It blasted a huge hole in the sea of fire, and the rolling waves of fire were pushed far away. The few of them paused for a moment, but in just a moment, they flew in another direction. Sonic booms resounded throughout the sea of fire, causing it to churn. With such a crazy flight, Uxian and the rest gradually saw other figures. There were also people like them, relying on the humming sound to find their way. Boom! As the group went deeper, the sea of fire was no longer calm. It was like the magma in a volcano boiling. Pillars of fire constantly shot up to the sky, as if it was about to erupt. The high temperature caused everyone to sweat profusely. Every time it erupted, it was as if a lamp had been lit, making this purple night extremely bright. Looking down from the sky above the god world, the center of Sourcepeak domain seemed to be on fire. Even from millions of miles up in the sky, one could still see the dazzling purple light. Phew! Is the purple night, dark flame, evolving into a star? After stopping once, the Fire God King wiped his sweat and couldn't help but mutter. Uxian was just about to fly out when she heard the Fire God King's words. She couldn't help but be stunned. She turned her gaze and asked doubtfully, What do you mean? I once went to the surface of a dying star and saw the scene there. The rolling flames were like hills, like an earthquake. The extreme temperature was so high that even gods couldn't withstand it. It's exactly the same as the rolling sea of fire here. The Fire God King took a deep breath and said, Furthermore, I can feel an extremely dense fire element forming in the depths of the sea of fire below. The surrounding temperature is also constantly rising. If this continues, this destructive flame will be able to burn down space. Now, the sea of fire isn't enough to condense the fire element. However, I can feel that the gravity is getting stronger. This is very similar to the nature of a star. So I'm thinking, is the purple night dark flame trying to evolve into a star? The Fire God King said in a deep voice. Can other divine flames do this? Uxian was shocked. She opened her mouth and asked, Her understanding of the god flame was close to zero. If defying God King had not mentioned it, she would not have paid attention to the annihilation sky and earth god items. No, as everyone knows, the stronger a creature is, the harder it is for it to gain intelligence. This kind of thing can only be done by creatures with intelligence, unless someone is controlling the purple night dark flame. So I think. Yishi shook her head and said, I think this purple night dark flame, could it be that it has gained intelligence? Possessing the power of an emperor god is the result of 60 eras of mutation. Hence, I'm thinking, could it be that during these 60 eras, it also gave birth to intelligence? Yishi's clear voice made everyone fall silent. It seemed that this was not impossible. 60 epochs, 60 trillion years across 3 eras. That extremely long period of time was enough for the purple night dark flame to undergo all sorts of changes, both imaginable and unimaginable. Since that was the case, it was reasonable for the purple night dark flame to have gained sentience. Although this was beyond the understanding of the majority of people, this kind of divine object that possessed the power of destruction could be said to be one of the species in the realm of the gods that had the least chance of gaining sentience. However, this was the only explanation for the purple night dark flame's actions. Suddenly, Uxian thought of something and could not help but ask, if that's the case, could it be that the purple night dark flame is humming? Everyone was stunned once again. They had been following the voice all this time, and had arrived near the center of the sea of fire. That clear and melodious voice had been guiding them. If the purple night dark flame wanted to stall for time and evolve into a star, why would it let the voice spread throughout the sea of fire and lead them there? Twisted space. I remember now. Uxian suddenly came to a realization. Looking at Yuin, she quickly said, do you still remember the spatial folds we encountered in the Ghost Chi Forest? Yuin nodded. That time, the space folds were caused by the soul-devouring tree. They borrowed the power of a nether void sword to break through space to escape. Thinking up to here, Yuin seemed to have guessed something. Her face was filled with shock. The purple night dark flame wants to use our power to help it evolve into a star. Uxian nodded. This also explains why we saw a corpse with nothing left, and not a pile of ash. But this was just her guess, it wasn't true. Everyone nodded. They did not rule out this possibility. Moreover, if all of the above guesses were true, then they would be facing a divine flame that possessed the power of a peak god emperor and had intelligence. Moreover, because it was a divine flame, and this was its home ground that it had managed for countless years, perhaps even a rebirth stage cultivator would not be able to subdue it. Things are getting more and more troublesome. Jin Jinwang laughed bitterly. From the time they entered until now, after countless guesses and decisions, what they saw was more and more difficult. That purple night dark flame, was it really subdued by humans? But I even used a pill. I can't just give up like this. Uxian fiercely gritted her teeth. She had used the greatest treasure that Xian Yin had given her. She could not return empty-handed. If by any chance, she would take out the whirlpool zither and play a song for the purple night dark flame. She would destroy this endless fire domain along with the flame itself. All right, Jin Jinwang and the others laughed bitterly. However, there was some worry in the depths of their eyes. Seeing the crazed look in her eyes, they did not know what this girl wanted to do. If not for the fact that they were worried that Uxian's strength was too low and would be in danger, they would not have gotten involved in this mess. They would have returned the moment they guessed that something was going to happen. While everyone was discussing, the space suddenly fluctuated slightly. The refreshing song changed, and what was being sung again was a deep and indescribable voice. However, the voice did not change much. It still had the same light and cheerful feeling. Just as the song changed, everyone's pupils shrank slightly. They saw that the sea of fire was churning more and more wildly. The undulating surface of the sea seemed to be flipping over. Moreover, they could see huge tongues of fire spewing into the sky. The light of the stars in the distant star domain dimmed a lot because of the churning. Twin moons. At this time, little Xian raised her head to look at the sky. Her eyes were a little sluggish, causing everyone to be stunned. They quickly raised their heads and could not help but take in a breath of cold air. What everyone saw was still the two discs. The light from the two moons intertwined to form a very beautiful purple curtain of light. However, the two moons had unknowingly gotten a lot closer. Their huge size filled up half of their vision. It was as if they could smell the wind of the star domain from the moon. When did they get so close? Uxin was startled. It wasn't that the moon was magnified, but rather that it was getting closer. The two moons had quietly gotten closer while they were rushing on their way. The purple moonlight hit them in the face. Wherever they looked, it was a purple world. As the two moons got closer, Uxin seemed to feel that the surrounding star power had become a lot denser. The surging purple sea of fire below was dyed with the color of the stars. Starlight sparkled. This was the most primitive power in the world. It only existed in the star domain and would descend on the god realm at any moment. However, because the distance was too far, by the time it reached the god realm, it was already many times thinner. Whoa! Uxin's heart suddenly had a very strange feeling. It was as if something was born in her body. That strange feeling made her quickly lower her head. She saw that her hands were shining with a very mysterious aura. It was as if a black coat was draped over her body. Moreover, this coat was shining with a little light. It was very small, but very bright. It was as if it could illuminate half the night sky. Uxin, this is the star power. Jin Wang and the others also felt that something was wrong. They quickly turned around and saw Uxin's strange appearance. They could not help but exclaim. Uxin was stunned. She carefully sensed it. This was a very strange energy. She rarely came into contact with it. She could feel that this energy was very pure. It entered her body from the outside, causing all the cells in her body to come alive and greedily absorb the star power. Could it be because of this? Uxin raised her head in a daze. The power of the stars would shine from the star field towards the god realm at all times, but she didn't seem to have this kind of reaction. If there was anything different about the power of the stars today, it would be the two huge disks in the sky that were very close to each other. The changes in their positions caused the power of the stars to be attracted towards the god realm. The star power is not something that everyone can absorb. To have such a reaction, it could only be a matter of the body's constitution, Jin Wang muttered. His golden eyes looked at Uxin and said, "Your constitution is, I don't know. I should say that I am just a mortal body. I don't have any constitution." Uxin shook her head. After living for so many years, she did not sense any constitution. Moreover, if there was one, Xianyin would have told her long ago. Gold God King rolled his eyes, but didn't say anything. Even if some people didn't have a special physique, they could still absorb the power of the stars because of some special reasons. Uxin had a lot of strange things on her body, so she could automatically absorb the power of the stars. It was within their scope of understanding, and that was the only way they could understand it. Spreading her hands, Uxin closed her eyes and sensed for a while. She looked at the depths of the sea of fire and took a deep breath. The light element flashed, and the speed was so fast that their bodies became a golden light beam. Seeing this, Jin Wang and the others quickly moved and followed. At the moment when Uxin and the others were hurrying, the other people in the sea of flames were also hurriedly flying. At that moment, the melody in the depths of the sea of flames changed again. The passionate melody caused the sea of flames to become berserk. Tongues of flames swept out for thousands, tens of thousands of miles. Those who were unable to dodge in time were instantly engulfed by the tongues of flames. Only charred corpses remained as the energy within their bodies were completely sucked dry. Many people who saw this scene felt fear in their hearts. They quickly turned around, wanting to escape from this hellish place. However, after flying above the sea of fire for a long time, they could only bump into the spatial folds again and again. Step by step, they entered a place they didn't want to go. It was as if the purple night dark flame didn't plan on letting anyone who came in leave. After flying for 2 hours, they finally came to a stop. Uxin and the rest came to a sudden stop in the sky. They saw a huge floating platform floating 100 meters above the sea of flames. A layer of purple-gold energy barrier was revolving around it, isolating it from all the heat waves that were rushing towards it. The people from the Serene Flame Pavilion and the Soul Lotus sect, they really came here. No one was surprised to see the floating platform. This was also their home ground. 60 eras was enough for them to catch any clues that got close to the purple night flame. Uxine only glanced at it once before moving her gaze away. The flames flickered and the singing rose in spirals, making people unable to help but become intoxicated. She looked at the front, where a beautiful purple lotus was blooming. It extended a long root and took root in the sea of flames. As they looked up, they saw a scene that caused the hearts of Uxin and the others to skip a beat. On the lotus flower, a pair of slender, jade-like legs dangled outside of the lotus flower, gently swaying. Her skin was as white as ice crystals, reflecting bits of purple light. His gaze jerked up, and he saw the owner of the pair of beautiful legs. At this moment, she was holding a black fire lotus the size of a head. Her somewhat soft arms were supporting it, and she was extending it towards the two huge moons. Her charming face had a pure and innocent smile, just like a child. The fire spirit has really given birth to intelligence. Chapter 174. On the giant lotus platform made of flames, there was no head-size flame that everyone dreamed of. Instead, there was a young girl in a luxurious purple dress who was humming a song. She was tall and slender, and her light purple hair fluttered in the wind like satin. Her slender waist was wrapped in a perfect curve by her tight dress, and her slender, jade-like arms were as white as snow. Under the purple moonlight, they were beautiful and magnificent. She had a perfect oval face, and a smile appeared on her beautiful face. Two cute little dimples appeared on her cheeks, and her crystal-clear eyes even carried a smile. This is the purple night, dark flame, the spirit of the flame. It's a miracle. She really gave birth to her own consciousness. Fire God King took a deep breath and murmured excitedly. The more powerful something was, the harder it was for it to give birth to its own consciousness. Now, they saw a living flame spirit, a flame in human form. This was a miracle in the divine world, and it broke everyone's understanding. Compared to Fire God King's excitement, everyone's face was gloomy. If it was a miracle, then it was a miracle. There was no lack of miracles in this world, and the divine world was a place full of divine spirits. However, what they were concerned about now was that the purple night dark flame had given birth to its own consciousness, which meant that she could use her power rationally, the power of a peak emperor god. However, Uxion's face was even weirder. She frowned. After more than a year, she finally saw the purple night dark flame again. However, she wasn't as excited as she thought she would be. At this moment, her aura was even a little chaotic. This strange energy fluctuation also attracted the attention of Jin Wang and the others. This energy fluctuation wasn't from Yuan Li or star energy, but a different kind of energy fluctuation. It was very, very special, and it made them palpitate. The whirlpool zither is vibrating. Why? Uxian carefully pressed her chest, and her face wasn't looking good. Xianyin placed the whirlpool zither in her heart as her greatest protection, and there was also the little ice blue person. At this moment, the two things seemed to be tense. The whirlpool zither was vibrating, as if it was threatened. As for the little ice blue person, its nervousness could be seen from its face that only had embryonic facial features. The whirlpool zither is the sound god's godhead weapon. Brother, you must be careful. If you feel that something is wrong with the whirlpool zither, it means that you've encountered something that can make it vigilant. Perhaps the enemy has a godhead weapon, or it has a godhead itself. No matter what, you must be extremely careful. He still remembered Tian Xian Yin's nervous warning. She said that anything that could make the whirlpool zither would be very dangerous for her. Even with the whirlpool zither, it couldn't guarantee that she would be safe. Godhead, Godhead, the purple night dark flame has a godhead. The sudden thought couldn't be dismissed. It made Yu shudder violently, and her breathing quickened. Xian had told her that godheads could attract and resonate with each other. The whirlpool zither's reaction was telling her that the purple night dark flame had a godhead. She's a god-level expert. Even someone as strong as Xian paled. If the purple night dark flame was only a peak god-level expert, she might be able to subdue it. With the whirlpool zither, she wasn't afraid of experts below the god level. However, if the purple night dark flame was god-level expert, if that was the case, then everyone here was just here to give her fuel. That level was a peak expert in the entire god realm. In the current god realm, other than the people Xian seemed to know, there weren't any other god-level experts. There weren't any records, and the 9 God Palaces' vast intelligence network couldn't find any god-level experts. Little Xian. Seeing her pale face, Ewing couldn't help but be stunned. She grabbed her hand and called out worriedly, "Little Xian." Xian took a deep breath and slowly shook her head. "I'm fine. I was just scared by myself." Then she stared at the girl formed by the purple night dark flame and activated her evil spirit eye. No, she doesn't have that suffocating strength. But after sensing it carefully, Xian felt that something was wrong. She had faced Xian's pressure before, and that feeling made her feel suffocated. It was as if the person standing in front of her wasn't a person, but a boundless star field. And that was when she let her energy circulate on its own. However, the purple night dark flame didn't give her that feeling. Just as she was giving herself a fright, figures suddenly appeared in the void around her. They were floating in the sky, constantly panting, and their faces were filled with fear. There's so many people, but that's good. We can't subdue the purple night dark flame alone. Sweeping his gaze across the sky, Jin Wang smiled and turned his gaze back to the girl on the huge lotus flower. When he looked over, everyone's attention was also on the beautiful girl shrouded in purple light. Looking at the purple-clothed girl who was swaying her slender legs on the huge flame lotus and humming a song, the entire space immediately became silent. Numerous gazes were greedily and fervently looking at the former. With the eyes of the people present, they were naturally able to tell that the original body of the girl in front of them was the true purple night serene flame. Of course, there were those who didn't have good eyesight. Seeing everyone's ecstatic expression, they only felt a little confused and didn't know what was going on. Purple night dark flame, I didn't expect that the seal for 60 eras didn't exhaust your energy. Instead, it made you so strong that you could trap an underworld emperor expert to death in a spatial trap. It's really impressive. On the floating platform, a white-haired elder in purple raised his head and stared at the purple night flame with an indifferent expression. The previous spatial wrinkles might have been quite troublesome for others, but for them, who had 2 Emperor of the Underworld experts, it was not a big deal. 60 eras of accumulation. No matter what, it's a disaster for the divine world to accumulate such a huge amount of energy. This time, we can't let her escape. If we let her go, the Sourcepeak region and even the divine world will be plunged into misery and suffering. The Nether King expert from the sacred artifact, Divine, Hall stared at the purple night dark flame with a fiery gaze. Greed continued to spread from the bottom of his heart. He had cultivated for countless years, and his previous experience had allowed him to clearly sense the terror of the purple night dark flame. Moreover, there was probably only one divine flame that could give birth to intelligence in the divine world. It was also because of this that the greed in his heart had skyrocketed. Hearing this person's Chinese, many people around nodded and looked at the purple night dark flame with a frightened expression. The ability that the latter had displayed was too terrifying. Boom! While everyone was talking, a strong light suddenly erupted from the sea of fire below. The fire was so strong that everyone could not help but squint their eyes. It was as if a sun had exploded below. Even the space trembled slightly. The beautiful girl on the enormous purple lotus suddenly withdrew the smile on her pretty face when she heard these words. Also stopped after she spat out the last syllable. Her pretty gem-like eyes did not contain any emotion as she glanced at the pavilion chief of the Serene Flame Pavilion and the others. Her jade-like hand withdrew the lotus flower that she had extended. However, she ignored them as her eyes locked onto Uxin, who had been feeling uneasy. A moment later, a calm voice was slowly emitted. "What is hidden in your body?" Hearing this, Uxin's heart jumped violently. She cursed inwardly. Divine deities would attract and resonate with each other. Although she had heard Sieni mention it before, she had not encountered it, so she was not clear. Now that she heard her question, Uxin could not help but bitterly smile. Soon after, she shook her head under everyone's strange gaze. She could not tell the truth. There were many experts here. If she took out the whirlpool zither, who knew what would happen? This was her only hope, so she naturally would not expose it. In the surrounding sky, when the numerous figures heard Purple Night Dark Flame's words that were filled with interest towards Uxin, their gazes were all astonished as they looked towards the latter. Clearly, they did not expect that the latter, who was only at the mortal stage, would appear here and even attract Purple Night Dark Flame's interest. You can't say it? Then forget it. Seeing Uxin shake her head, Purple Night Dark Flame wrinkled her nose in displeasure. She retracted her gaze. Even if Uxin did not say it, she could guess it, so there was no need to force her to say it. Holding the fire lotus in her jade-like hands, Purple Night Dark Flame raised her head towards the huge moon and smiled sweetly. That beautiful appearance made everyone take another look at her. However, their eyes were filled with fear. They knew that this girl was not only beautiful, she had the power to destroy everyone here. Purple Night in the sky, destined person. I have waited for this day for a long time. A clear and melodious voice with a hint of tiredness that was difficult to detect came out from that small cherry mouth, causing everyone to be slightly surprised. Destined person? Could it be that the Purple Night Dark Flame had a master? Which one of you is the person he chose? Ziyu Yin indifferently said. His clear and melodious words made everyone confused. Him? Who is he? Out of the 150 divine flames in the divine world, only one would be born. Unless it was completely destroyed, it would not give birth to a second divine flame. Could it be that he was the previous master of the Purple Night Dark Flame? No, forget it. Once I've erased all of you, I'll know who he is. If he isn't, so be it. If he isn't, then I'll go and find him myself. From the moment you enter my fire domain, you can only enter and not leave. The purple-clothed girl waved her jade-like hands, and the black lotus was gently placed on the lotus throne behind her. An invisible fluctuation spread out from her body. The sea of fire below suddenly became abnormally crazy. The space trembled more intensely than before. Seeing this scene, everyone was startled. Purple Night Dark Flame had mobilized the entire fire domain. Was she trying to catch them all in one fell swoop? Starlock. The sea of fire suddenly became violent. Following that, the raging light purple flames burst out from the purple-clothed girl's body and flew out. In the blink of an eye, it enveloped the entire world. It was like a flaming prison, wrapping Uxin and the others within. 5 huge light purple curtains of fire poured down from the sky and connected to the sea of fire below. From afar, it looked like a huge prison that connected the heavens and the earth. When the prison was formed, the sea of fire below suddenly became abnormally bright. That light was like a burning sun, and they were on the surface of the sun. The temperature in the prison was rising rapidly. Uxin and the rest were clustered together. Their expressions were grave as they observed their surroundings. They could sense that when this prison was formed and the sea of fire below changed, a frightening temperature, which caused even her to feel a little fearful, was swiftly spreading. She's trying to refine all of us. Fire God King said with a grave expression. The Purple Night Dark Flame's strength is extremely terrifying. Right now, it's probably equivalent to a genuine peak God Emperor expert. In addition, this is her home ground. With the strange ability of the Purple Night Dark Flame, even a late divine rank expert would find it hard to subdue her. Jin Wang said in a deep voice. Yuxian bitterly smiled and shook her head. Not only that, she also had a divine spark. The divine spark that could make the whirlpool zither move. After sleeping for so many years, it just so happens that I'm a little bored. Before the star core forms, let me play with you guys. The girl smiled sweetly, but that seductive smile was filled with an indescribable evil. Chapter 175. The star core is indeed transforming the sea of fire into a star. If it succeeds, it will be a great disaster for the divine world. Fire God King could not help but gasp when he heard that. His gloomy voice caused everyone's expression to change slightly. What will happen if it succeeds? With a light wave of his hand, the divine light mirror floated out and hung above his head. Strands of golden energy fell on Yuxian's body, and the sky piercer that was longer than a person also flew out. He even took the time to ask, "Guess what will happen if there are 3 suns in the sky?" Jin Wang asked in return. He felt that the hint was not enough and added, "Moreover, these suns are made from divine flames." Hearing this, Yuxian could not help but imagine. Then, her face gradually turned serious. If there was an additional star condensed from powerful divine flames, the extreme heat would sprinkle down from the sky and directly illuminate the god's world. That terrifying heat would burn the god's world into a wasteland. Other than those extremely powerful great forces, everyone else would die a tragic death under that heat. Everyone's expression changed slightly. It seemed that they had also thought of such a terrifying situation. Bang! Bang! While everyone's hearts were filled with shock, low and deep explosion sounds were suddenly emitted from a short distance behind them. Yuxian and the rest hurriedly turned their heads, only to see numerous figures suddenly explode into clusters of blood mist. The blood mist had just appeared when it was completely vaporized by the frighteningly high temperature. The sudden explosion of bodies caused many people to panic. They were all divine experts, but they did not see anyone launching any attacks. They did not even feel the ripples of energy. However, these people, horror swiftly spread amongst the crowd, causing quite a number of people to hurriedly use a large amount of energy to cover their bodies in order to guard against this invisible attack. However, an increasing number of human figures exploded out of nowhere. The sound of blood and bones shattering caused one's scalp to turn numb. This kind of killing method was really invisible and colorless. Don't communicate with the energy of heaven and earth. In the domain of purple night flame, every drop of energy has her will. If you don't want to die, don't use the energy of heaven and earth recklessly. As the panic spread, someone who understood the situation finally shouted. Upon hearing this cry, the remaining people hurriedly cut off the connection between the natural strength and their bodies. The only thing churning on the surface of their bodies was their own essence strength. At this moment, the situation of the self-destruction gradually weakened. Since you know that I can use my will to control the energy of heaven and earth. The purple-clothed girl raised her eyes indifferently. She stretched out her hand and gently clenched it towards the crowd below. Bang! 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 The moment the purple-clothed girl clenched her hand, the energy in the entire sky instantly boiled. Monstrous purple flames spewed out from the void, causing the place instantly became chaotic. Almost 90% of the experts below God and below, their bodies suddenly exploded in an extremely strange manner. It was as if the seeds of explosion was planted in their bodies. What a ruthless method! Seeing that the majority of the experts had disappeared in the blink of an eye, and the sky was filled with a rapidly dissipating blood mist, Yuxian could not help but wipe her sweat. When the purple night flame clenched her hand, that terrifying fluctuation swept through everyone's body, as if it was triggering something. Fortunately, they did not use the energy here after entering. Otherwise, the blood mist in the sky would be their end. Purple night sky. My energy is limitless. Looking at the much emptier sky, A faint smile appeared on the purple-clothed girl's face. Her faint purple eyes glanced at the remaining people and stopped at UXIN for a while. Soon after, she slowly sat down beside the lotus platform. With a gentle wave of her hand, the sea of fire below surged even more violently. The entire sea of fire seemed to be boiling. The dazzling light was really like a bright sun. However, it contained even more destructive energy than the sun. This was a destructive power that could flatten half of the divine world. We can't let her complete the evolution of a star. The divine world will be destroyed because of this. In the face of the purple night flame's big move, everyone present was slightly stunned. Even the pavilion master of the serene flame pavilion frowned slowly. Looks like I have disappeared for such a long time that no one remembers what happened back then. Your serene flame pavilion has waited bitterly for me for 60 years, thinking that you have the situation under control. Unfortunately, other than her, no one here can hurt me. The purple-clothed girl smiled at everyone and said softly, "If that's the case, why don't you wait for me to complete the evolution of star? When the purple light illuminates the sky, the person chosen by that person will definitely appear." UXIN's face twitched. This sentence made everyone's gaze fall on her. She smiled bitterly. Why did she mention her for no reason? Let her wait quietly. Everyone's gaze was a little strange. The purple night flame's strength was close to that of a god-level expert, but she said that only UXIN could hurt her. Didn't that mean that this little girl who looked 14 or 15 years old had the strength of a god-level expert? How could it be? Everyone shook their heads. The pavilion master of the serene flame pavilion stared at the purple night flame in the distance. Her strength was close to that of a god-level expert. Such terrifying strength, there were not many people in the divine world who had such power. However, the serene flame pavilion had prepared for the purple night flame for 60 years. How could they not have any tricks up their sleeves? One should know that the founder of the serene flame pavilion was also a god-level expert. Of course, that was a trump card. It was impossible for them to use it immediately. Everyone, no matter what grudges we have, this time, if we want to live and defeat the purple night flame, we have to work together. No matter if it's for the greater good or for personal reasons. The pavilion master of the serene flame pavilion first looked in the direction of UXIN and the rest. Although Jin Wang and the rest looked like god underworld experts, the pavilion master who had heard of the latter naturally did not think that they were insignificant god underworld experts. If they were not willing to work together, there would be a lot of trouble. Furthermore, Violet Knight Dark Flame also said that UXIN had the strength to injure him. People at their level naturally wouldn't speak without thinking. Although it wasn't clear what position Violet Knight Dark Flame was trying to place UXIN in, at least she wasn't like what others thought her to be. How could she be a nobody when she had the strength to injure Violet Knight Dark Flame, who was at the peak of the God Emperor realm? Hearing the words of the pavilion master of the Serene Flame Pavilion, the eyes of many experts flickered. Among this group of people, the strongest was the Serene Flame Pavilion, who had 2 underworld emperors. If the Purple Night Flame suffered any losses, they would definitely use their trump card. The one who would benefit in the end would be the Serene Flame Pavilion. As for UXIN and the rest, no one took it seriously. They only thought that the Purple Night Flame wanted them to change their target. Seeing that everyone was silent, the pavilion master of the Serene Flame Pavilion was not surprised. He said indifferently, "Hurry up and think about it. If anyone has the confidence to deal with the Purple Night Flame alone, I guarantee that I will not interfere." After saying that, he looked thoughtfully at UXIN. He firmly believed that since the Purple Night Flame had said so, this little girl must be a dangerous person. You are right. No matter what the purpose is, it is indeed better to join forces now. The Purple Night Flame does not seem to want us to leave. Jin Wang nodded. The ancestors of the 9 divine temples had also silently contributed to the divine world. This excellent style had been passed down from generation to generation. Although there was no earth-shattering event, if there was something that threatened the ordinary people of the divine world, the 9 divine temples would also help. In the eyes of others, they were more like guardians. The current situation had to be like this. Seeing that Jin Wang and the rest nodded, the sacred weapon divine temple and other powerful forces also nodded slightly. Mysterious sister, you plan to, seeing that the pavilion master of the Serene Flame Pavilion had actually looked at them, or rather at UX. She could not help but wrinkle her nose and ask softly. UXIN raised her head and looked at the pavilion master of the Serene Flame Pavilion for a moment. She immediately shook her head and said, "My power can only be used when my life is in danger. At other times, that power cannot be used by me." After saying that, she could not help but roll her eyes in her heart. Of course, the swirling long zither could be used when her life was in danger. She could use the Godhead weapon at any time. The reason why she did not agree was that she was afraid that after taking out the swirling long zither, many people would remember her. If she could not defeat the purple night flame in the end, then she would use the swirling long zither to blast a hole and take everyone to escape. If she could successfully defeat the purple night flame, then she would have a trump card that could not be used. Hearing this, the pavilion master of the Serene Flame Pavilion could not help but be a little disappointed. If he could make UXIN use that power, then they would be able to seize the purple night flame's origin source flame. Shaking his head, the pavilion master of the Serene Flame Pavilion smiled faintly and said, "Since that is the case, friends whose strength is above Shunming, we will deal with the purple night flame together. Those who have nothing to do with it, please step back. If anything happens, please let us know. Yishi and I will do our best to support you." UXIN sighed and turned her head to Jin Wang and the rest and said softly, "Seniors, please be careful. My formation will take a while to activate." Hearing this, Jin Wang grinned and said, "Don't worry." They were not ordinary people and naturally knew the situation at this moment. Joining forces with the Serene Flame Pavilion to fight the enemy was just to take what they needed. They had no enmity with the Serene Flame Pavilion. If the latter dared to provoke Jin Wang and the rest under such circumstances, they would definitely suffer the wrath of the 9 divine temples. Hey, do you really want to fight?" Looking at the pavilion master of the Serene Flame Pavilion with interest, the girl in purple could not help but sneer and said with a faint smile, "2 emperors of the underworld, 1 king of the underworld, and dozens of divine gods in Shunming. How powerful!" Hearing this, UXIN's eyes narrowed and swept across those who had stepped out. Most of the gods present, except for Jin Wang and the rest, basically had the fire element. With so many god experts, it could be said that this was the largest military force she had seen in these years. She did not know what trump card the pavilion master of the Serene Flame Pavilion had, but she knew that the Sacred Weapon Palace had a sacred weapon array. With so many gods present, if they gathered all their divine weapons together and condensed everyone's energy, they would probably be able to severely injure the purple night flame. When UXIN was estimating everyone's strength, the pavilion master of the Serene Flame Pavilion's figure flashed and appeared 1,000 feet in front of the huge purple lotus. At this moment, the other experts also surrounded the purple night flame. Dozens of gods who had surpassed Shunming joined forces. That kind of momentum was enough to be called earth-shattering. And when everyone was ready for battle, the people standing in the sky also hurriedly retreated. With so many experts joining forces, that kind of power was bound to be shocking. They did not want to be affected. In such an earth-shattering battle, they could not help. As everyone retreated, the girl in purple also laughed softly. She raised her head and looked at the sealed area. Smiling faintly, she said, "Interesting. It reminds me of the past. Serene Flame Axe." A delicate shout came from her small mouth. With a fierce wave of her delicate hand, the black lotus on the lotus platform behind her trembled slightly and turned into a flame. It condensed into a 2-meter-long black axe in front of the girl in purple. The blade was like a crescent moon, reflecting a frightening, cold light. She grabbed the huge axe in her hand. Purple light flowed, and the sea of fire below also surged fiercely. "Those who stand in my way die." As the last word fell, A terrifying shock wave suddenly swept out from the huge axe in her hand. The sea of fire below suddenly erupted like a volcano, and a huge pillar of fire soared into the sky. That kind of terrifying energy. It caused the faces of the pavilion master and the others to change slightly. "Let's attack together." The pavilion master of the serene flame pavilion shouted. A monstrous aura broke out from his body. A few dazzling hand seals changed rapidly, and the energy that soared into the sky suddenly trembled. Then, it surged fiercely between his palms, condensing into a huge palm, and slammed fiercely toward the huge pillar of fire below. The auras of the others also surged violently. Pillars of energy cut across the sky, heading toward the shock wave or the pillar of fire that was rushing toward them. Boom! An earth-shattering noise resounded through the sky. Gorgeous energy fireworks suddenly bloomed in the sky. The many pillars of energy were easily destroyed after coming into contact with the shock wave. In the blink of an eye, they were completely annihilated. As the loud noise resounded, a series of muffled groans sounded in the sky. There were even some who directly spat out mouthfuls of blood and flew backward. "Die!" A delicate shout came from the sky. The pavilion master of the serene flame pavilion had just stabilized himself when a sense of danger descended from the sky. He raised his head abruptly and saw a slender figure descending from the sky with a huge axe that seemed to be able to split the heavens and earth. Feeling the power contained in the huge axe, his face became much paler. Pillars of energy soared into the sky and condensed into a huge energy barrier in front of the pavilion master of the serene flame pavilion. He also shouted angrily, and a terrifying black flame rose from his hands. With the flame in his palms, he slammed them on the energy barrier. Light flowed, making it look very sturdy. Bam! The dull noise resounded through the sky again. Immediately, everyone saw that in the sky, there were suddenly many figures rushing down from the sky at high speed and violently smashing into the sea of fire. The pavilion master of the serene flame pavilion and the others trembled and spat out mouthfuls of blood. Then, they smashed into the sea of fire, creating a huge wave of fire. "So, I told you not to disturb me." Exine and the others looked at this scene, and the horror on their faces became more and more intense. Dozens of gods and 2 emperors of the underworld were in such a sorry state in the hands of Purple Night Flame. Although the latter had the home ground and had the geographical advantage, this overwhelming attack was too ferocious. Bam! The purple sea of fire exploded, and dozens of figures rushed out again. Finally, they were suspended in the air. However, those with sharp eyes noticed that the number of experts who rushed up seemed to be a little less. They seemed to have been annihilated in the sea of fire. Chapter 176. Everyone, if we continue to hide our strength, I'm afraid that we will no longer have the chance to attack. The pavilion chief of the serene flame pavilion coldly cried out with a gloomy expression. If this were to continue, it was likely that they would begin to lose their endurance. Everyone frowned slightly when they heard his words. After being violently struck by the purple night dark flame twice earlier, some injuries had appeared within their bodies. This was especially the case for the purple night dark flame. It was like maggots that had stuck to their bodies. They were unable to expel it within a short period of time. We can only talk after defeating the purple night dark flame. This thought flashed across everyone's hearts. Their expressions slowly became solemn. The vast and mighty aura that was suspended around the purple night dark flame swiftly soared. "Brother Fu Bin, help me block it for a while." Guiju let out a low cry. His body swiftly pulled back in empty space. An enormous energy continuously surged out from his body. Both of his hands swiftly danced at this moment. A frightening strength formed numerous tornadoes around him, sweeping the sea of fire until it became violent. The pavilion chief of the serene flame pavilion looked at Guiju's solemn manner and nodded. His hand seals swiftly changed. A vast and mighty do chi that caused even the sky to tremble spread out from his body. At this moment, he appeared to have released all of his strength. The remaining people also clenched their teeth when the two of them unleashed their strength. They no longer dared to hold anything back. The energy within their bodies circulated wildly. In an instant, wild winds blew and thunder rolled. Even the purple-colored viscous sea of fire below began to roar wildly, forming huge flame waves that were thousands of feet tall. Clang! Just as everyone was about to unleash their strength, a series of metal clashing sounds suddenly sounded in the sky. An enormous shadow suddenly pounced toward the pavilion chief and the others. They saw numerous purple-colored chains shooting down from the sky. Before they could react, they had already surrounded everyone. Finally, following a couple of clanging sounds, they formed an enormous chain prison that covered all of the experts within. I don't have the time to play with all of you. If you want to play, all of you can play by yourselves. The purple knight, Dark Flame, randomly patted her hands and yawned. Mei Mao once again glanced at Yuexin, after which her body swayed and appeared on the enormous fire lotus platform. The large axe in her hand turned back into a small black fire lotus that floated to the middle of the lotus platform. I'm trapped inside now. Yuexin's face twitched as she looked at the sky that had suddenly become empty. Light flowed on those chains, and any energy that came in contact with them would be reflected back. Even if the powerhouse inside wasn't weak, he wouldn't be able to come out for a while. Boom! The rumbling sound that was suddenly transmitted caused everyone outside of the chains to be startled. The shaking of the space caused them to stagger. Their eyes turned and saw that the sea of fire below, which had stopped, had once again begun to churn intensely. There was a cluster of things deep within it that was becoming increasingly bright. That bright appearance caused the hearts of quite a number of people to sink. The evolution of the star's core is continuing. From the looks of it, in less than 4 hours, it should. Yishi's small face was also full of solemnity. If this purple star really did form, the first to be burned to ashes would be them. After that, the common people of the god realm, including those below the level of gods, would all die a painful death under this brilliant purple sun. It's that black fire lotus. Yuexin exclaimed in a low voice. When the black fire lotus turned into a large axe, she clearly felt that the activity of the sea of fire below had weakened a lot. Just a moment ago, the sea of fire had begun to churn intensely again. If there wasn't anything different, or if there wasn't any way to activate the Purple Knight Dark Flame, it should be that black fire lotus. We can't let her continue like this. Yuexin and Yishi looked at each other and saw the seriousness in each other's eyes. They both took a deep breath and firmly nodded their heads. Sister Xian, help me take care of Sister Yuyin. Yuexin patted Yu Yin's shoulder and took a deep breath. She looked at little Xian, who was worriedly looking at the chain prison. She and Xue Ji's uncles hadn't rushed out yet. Hearing this, the three of them were stunned. They instinctively felt that something was wrong. They quickly turned their gazes and saw the determined faces of Yuexin and Yishi. Little Star, Yuyin couldn't help but transmit her voice. She knew why this idiot had such an expression. However, this was different from usual. Normally, they would only be facing God Realm experts at most. This time, they were facing a divine flame that stood at the peak of the God Realm. It was the terrifying Purple Knight Dark Flame that couldn't be defeated by so many experts, even if they joined forces. Don't worry, you won't die. Yuexin's lips curled up into a smile that was uglier than crying. She patted Yu Yin's head. Wait, that old bastard told me to look after you. Don't mess around. If something happens to you, how am I going to explain it? Little Xian frowned and took a step to the side, blocking Yuexin's path. She couldn't help but complain. Sister Xian, if we continue to stay here, everyone will die. Yuexin shook her head and smiled sweetly. Then, she grabbed Yishi's little hand and stomped her foot on the ground. A formation appeared under her feet. When the blue light appeared, little Xian cursed in her heart. Her jade-like hand stretched out as fast as lightning. However, before she could touch them. Uxian activated the formation and disappeared from the spot, causing little Xian to grab empty air. Their figures flashed and appeared 1,000 meters away from the purple night dark flame. Uxian and Yi, she took a deep breath, and their gazes suddenly became sharp. That purple night dark flame, I haven't done anything yet. Don't even think about condensing a star core. A lovely shout suddenly rang out, causing everyone in the sky to be startled. Turning their gazes, they saw Uxian and Yi Shi flying over together. However, when they saw the two of them, they could not help but sigh. They were merely two mundane stage practitioners. What could they do? However, contrary to everyone's expectations, the purple-clothed girl suddenly raised her head when she heard the voice. Her charming face became more dignified. Mei Mao stared at Uxian. You also want to make a move? This dignified voice startled everyone. The purple night dark flame didn't become serious when many gods joined forces just now. However, these two people just stood there and made her solemn. When you condense a star core, everyone here will be finished. If you don't make a move now, when will you? Yishi said in a deep voice. Just as he finished speaking, Uxian let out a low shout. The patterns on her arm all lit up, and weapons shot out one after another. After that, she rubbed her hand on the pendant, and the wide black halberd appeared in her hand. Several divine artifacts revolved around her, causing everyone to suck in a breath of cold air. These are all high-ranked divine weapons. As if they were frightened, everyone's face turned pale when they saw the numerous divine weapons. However, these weren't all of Uxian's weapons. She still hadn't taken out the Linghong sword. At this moment, it was impossible to take out the divine weapon. If she escaped today, she would be targeted by many forces. If she left the Linghong sword here, perhaps everyone would give up on the purple night dark flame and come for the Linghong sword. The latter was definitely much easier. To be honest, I'm very nervous, Uxian muttered nervously as she adjusted the halberd in her hand. Don't talk about you. I'm also very nervous, Yi Shi, who was holding many arrays, said with a trembling voice. However, she forced herself to calm down and laugh dryly. When the purple-clothed girl saw the two of them, she couldn't help but frown. She waved her delicate hand, and the sea of fire below surged violently. Soon after, a huge purple flaming axe shot out from the sea of fire. In a flash, it appeared in the purple night dark flame's hand. Taking a deep breath, Uxian's expression turned serious. She tilted her head and nodded at Yi Shi. She tightened her grip on the halberd and muttered. 3. The purple night dark flame cried out. Flames covered the sky and earth, bringing along extremely hot waves of fire, rushed towards Uxian and Yi Shi. The momentum was even more terrifying than when they were fighting against many experts. It was as if the heavens and earth were going to be incinerated. 2. Looking at the flames that covered the sky, Yi Shi's expression turned grave. With a thought, a huge array that was 100,000 feet wide suddenly broke out from the void. That huge array was actually similar to Yun Nuoxing's energy decomposition array. When the flames rushed towards it, they were decomposed, leaving behind only a wisp of hot air. However, the boundless flames continued to pounce onto the formation, causing it to become a lot dimmer. It was only able to endure for a short moment before it was unable to bear the heavy burden and shattered. The flames that were being suppressed after that frantically roared towards Uxian and Yu. 1. When the last word rang out, Uxian also cried out. She grabbed the halberd and brought along many divine artifacts. The array beneath her feet flashed, and her figure flashed. Light elements surged, and her figure suddenly rushed out. However, what shocked everyone was that the two of them weren't rushing towards the purple night dark flame. Instead, they were rushing towards the chain prison. Seeing this scene, Purple Night Dark Flame was also taken aback. After reacting, he furrowed his brows and fiercely stomped his feet on the lotus platform. His body became a purple lightning as he charged towards Uxian and Purple Night Dark Flame. With a wave of his hand, The huge axe brought along a blazing wind as it fiercely smashed towards Uxion's back. Clang! A giant axe suddenly appeared in the air. As soon as the golden giant axe appeared, it violently collided with the purple giant axe. The sound of metal colliding caused everyone to hurriedly cover their ears. In the blink of an eye, they appeared outside the chain prison. The divine artifacts and tens of thousands of formations immediately went berserk. Uxion and Yishi both roared angrily. Wielding their divine artifacts and formations, they smashed toward the prison. Divine artifacts and earth-shattering energies joined together as they continuously pounced onto the chain prison. Dazzling energies exploded on the chain, and the clanking sounds of chains resounded. The purple energy rapidly flowed and resisted those energies. However, the energy wave after energy wave caused the chain prison to be overwhelmed. The energy on the chain had actually dimmed. Stop! The purple-clothed girl immediately became a little anxious when she saw this. Her flying speed increased by a lot. With a sudden wave of her jade-like hand, a circular fire ring appeared in front of her and swiftly spread out. In the blink of an eye, it violently collided with Uxion's duo. Immediately, a loud and clear explosion resounded across the sky. Oomph! The barrier and arrays of the divine light mirror were instantly shattered. Uxion and Yishi let out a groan as blood uncontrollably flowed out. Uxion clenched her teeth, and the energy of the Linghong's sword surged towards the halberd. Following a sharp and furious roar, she suddenly smashed the halberd towards the chain. A deafening sound accompanied by a terrifying energy ripple was emitted from the tip of the halberd. It caused the space to rapidly fluctuate. Everyone was shocked to see that the space within a 10-meter radius was actually twisting like a towel. Crack! A clear shattering sound rang out, causing the expressions of everyone, including the purple-clothed girl, to slightly change. Mei Mao turned around and saw that at the place where the halberd and the chain came into contact, a small pale white crack was slowly spreading out. A piece of the halberd also slowly fell, forcefully enduring the stuffiness in her chest. Uxion fiercely clenched her teeth. She raised the halberd and wanted to stab at the chain once again. However, a terrifying palm wind came from behind her. A small white, jade-like hand pierced through the space and came out from the pitch-black space. It violently slammed towards Uxion's back. The blazing wind caused the space to be unable to bear the pressure and shattered. Before the terrifying, jade-like hand came close, the wind had already rushed over and slammed onto the golden light barrier on the surface of her body. It caused the divine light mirror's barrier to be on the verge of collapse. The force also entered the barrier, causing Uxion's face to turn pale. She spat out a large mouthful of blood, but she still violently swung the halberd down. Clang! The sudden loud sound caused her to tremble. Just as she was about to turn her head, she heard Yishi's furious roar. Are you crazy? What good will it do for you to risk your life to save them? Even if you think that you can't subdue the purple night dark flame, don't use such a method to throw away your life. Amidst the loud rumbling sounds, one could hear Yishi's muffled groans one after another. The formation in front of her rapidly faded under the blazing purple flames, and waves of destructive strength chi struck her petite body, causing her pretty face to become much paler. Uxion bitterly smiled. With the swirling zither in her body, she could at least withstand one attack from the purple night dark flame. That was why she risked her life. Otherwise, she would have used the light element to escape. While she was bitterly laughing, a cracking sound was suddenly emitted, causing the expressions of the three of them to change. Their gazes shifted to the side, only to see numerous cracks appearing at the area where the chains were entwined. These cracks swiftly spread to other areas, before finally connecting with the cracks created by Uxion's halberd. Bang! Along with a muffled sound, the purple chain shattered into dust that filled the sky. The force from the explosion sent Uxion and the other two flying. They tumbled a few hundred meters in the sky, before coming to a stop. Suddenly, a terrifying crack quietly opened up in space. It extended for tens of thousands of miles like a spatial black hole. The berserk spatial storm caused everyone to sway unsteadily like a small boat in a storm. There were even some people who were unable to stabilize their bodies and were swept into the storm, leaving behind a shriek of being torn apart by the storm. Not even a speck of their bodies was left behind. The unceasingly cracking space stabilized in a few breaths of time. Soon after, the crack slowly turned silver, and a huge black object rushed out from the crack. Its length spanned across the entire crack, spanning tens of thousands of miles. As soon as it came out, it directly smashed into the sea of flames below, splashing up huge waves of flames that soared to the sky. The thousands of feet tall waves of flames were like real ocean waves. Riding on the sea of flames, it rapidly spread out in the distance, covering those who were scared out of their wits and unable to react. In an instant, they turned into wisps of green smoke without even leaving behind their last words. Uxin was also frightened. Looking at the thousands of feet tall curtain of flames, she was so frightened that she couldn't even utter a sound. With a flash of the light element, she carried Yi Shi and rushed to the side of Yin and the other two. Golden chains rapidly shot out from her red robe, wrapping around the three of them as they desperately escaped. As for those who had quick reactions, they instantly moved, using all of their strength to fly towards the sky, avoiding the thousands of feet tall waves of flames. In an instant, the sky turned chaotic. The waves of flames covered the distance like waves. They came quickly and left quickly. Only when everyone had calmed down did they find time to turn their heads to look at the black object. Sounds of cold breaths being sucked in rose and fell in the sky. Yuyan City. Chapter 177. The monstrous waves slowly came to a stop in the distance, splashing against the sea of flames and splashing out thousands of waves. The purple light from the flames illuminated everyone's strange expressions. The atmosphere in the sky instantly became comical and strange. The huge black object that was steadily stationed above the sea of flames revealed its appearance under the two colors of the moonlight. It was a stone pillar that seemed to reach the heavens. On top of it was a purple gold palace. The buildings below it were arranged in a somewhat disorderly manner. The center of the entire city was that stone pillar that stood in the middle of the city. At this moment, the entire Yuyan city was illuminated with an azure light. The crisscrossing lights on the streets looked very disorderly. If one was in the middle of it, they would not be able to see anything. However, right now, everyone was floating in the sky. Although they could not see the entire Yuyan city from above, they could still vaguely see that the flickering azure light was a huge array that was engraved with mysterious runes. The core of the array was that huge pillar that reached the heavens. The purple gold palace above the huge pillar was emitting azure light. It slowly spread along the stone pillar towards the array below. The purple gold and azure light of the entire palace flickered. The rhythm of the light was like the beating of a heart. Furthermore, the palace lit up with threads of another color. The blood-red energy matrix spread to every corner of the palace. When it was reflected outside the palace, it looked like blood vessels. The same scene was playing out on some of the tall buildings in the outskirts of Ghostly Flame City. Countless blood-red threads slowly seeped into the magic formation below, causing the light to become much brighter. Gold and red intertwined with an evil light, making it look like a blood-red disc. That is, blood sacrifice, an array that has been tainted by blood. Seeing the blood-red threads outside the palace, Yuyin immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. She covered her mouth with her delicate hand, and her face was filled with shock. After the encirclement chains collapsed, everyone escaped in a somewhat sorry state. Jin Wang and the others appeared in front of Uxian and the others in a flash. They looked down and also recognized what those red threads were. Their faces became more and more serious. What a vicious method. Such a large-scale activation has consumed over 1 million lives. Yi, who was in midair, naturally saw this scene. She sighed and muttered, "The song of death, using millions of lives as a sacrifice. Is it finally going to bear its fangs now?" The Serene Flame Pavilion's generosity had indeed shocked everyone. No one had thought in this direction before. To be able to stand for 60 eras without falling, perhaps this was their greatest trump card. The founder of the Serene Flame Pavilion had indeed put in a lot of effort for the Purple Night Dark Flame. What's going on? Just as everyone was shocked, a furious roar rang out from the Serene Flame Pavilion at the center of Yuyan City, causing everyone to be shocked. This seemed to be the voice of the pavilion master of the Serene Flame Pavilion. Shifting his gaze, he saw the people from the Serene Flame Pavilion and the Soul Lotus sect standing quietly in the sky above the Serene Flame Pavilion. The pavilion master of the Serene Flame Pavilion looked at the magic array that covered the entire Serene Flame City. His voice was filled with anger and confusion that could not be concealed. This roar directly stunned everyone. Could it be that some strange change had occurred in the magic array that even he could not control? What is this blood sacrifice all about? The pavilion master of the Yuyan Pavilion fiercely turned his head and looked at the people behind him. The Song of Death was a very special kind of Saint Art array. Although its array was very sacred, its power was filled with evil. However, once the Saint Art array was sacrificed, its sacred power would be greatly weakened. What was left was the dense evil chi. A Saint Art array that had lost its sacred power was no different from an ordinary array. The Song of Death has been destroyed. This is really bad. Guiju also frowned slightly. He looked at Yuyan City with some confusion. He had been guarding Yuyan City for some time, but he did not feel anything unusual. In other words, Yuyan City was tens of thousands of miles long and wide. He did not know how many people there were. Other than the attack of the Abyss Divine Palace that day, he did not see anything unusual missing. As for the young Shanming of the Serene Flame Pavilion, he seemed to have thought of something. The strange events that had persisted for more than half a year in the Serene Flame City. If there was anything wrong with it, it would be the so-called disappearances. Even Shanming experts could die without knowing why. It was said that someone had barged into the Serene Flame Pavilion and saw corpses and blood everywhere. After thinking for a while, the young Shanming hurriedly told the pavilion master of the Yuyan Pavilion about this matter. The pavilion master's eyes flickered. He had seen the Song of Death once before. However, at that time, the Song of Death had not been activated. It did not have such dense evil chi. In the few years that he had been away, something had happened that made the Song of Death go out of control. However, now was not the time to think about this. He shook his head fiercely and snorted coldly. All the power in his body surged into the great array of Yuyan City. The experts of the Yuyan Pavilion behind him saw this and also transmitted all their energy into the great array. The monstrous energy shattered the surrounding space. Pieces of space fragments fell from the sky. The empty space suddenly occupied the entire sky. As soon as this energy was poured into the great array, the surrounding energy of heaven and earth became abnormally chaotic. It was all uncontrollably absorbed by the great array. The majestic power of stars also broke through the distance of space, turning into huge pillars of light that poured into the great array of Yuyan City. After receiving this energy, the great array of Yuyan City was activated in an instant. Monstrous killing intent poured out. Countless runes gathered in the void. The energy lines that covered the sky were like fluttering strands of hair as they intertwined with the great array of death. An energy that could shake heaven and earth was slowly born. Jin Wang and the others could not help but tremble. Yuyan City collapsed. As soon as this energy was born, the pavilion master of the Serene Flame Pavilion changed his hand seal. Instantly, the entire formation began to tremble violently. Along with it, the main body of the formation, Serene Flame City, also began to tremble. The entire Serene Flame City continued to tremble for a minute. Under everyone's shocked gazes, the huge Serene Flame City was completely shattered. Those blood-colored threads had already completely integrated into the formation. A destructive energy uncontrollably condensed in the center of the formation. A bean-sized purplish-gold light spot also quietly appeared. The moment the speck of light appeared, all the energy of the great array of death was instantly absorbed. Even the energy of heaven and earth within hundreds of thousands of miles had dried up. The entire world trembled violently, shattering large patches of space. As for the great array of death, it was also filled with cracks. It was as if it could no longer withstand the energy that was derived from it. Changing his hand seal, the pavilion master of the Yuyan Pavilion raised the great array of death above his head. With a sinister laugh, he slapped his palms together. The pea-sized speck of light instantly turned into a golden ring that spread out, covering the entire great array of death. Then it faced the manor below. Terrifying ripples spread out, causing everyone's faces to turn pale. Even an emperor god would not feel good if he was hit by this energy, blood sacrifice's song of death. You can't even unleash 1% of its power. In the sky, when the purple-clothed girl saw the situation, she shook her head indifferently. With a wave of her jade-like hand, the sea of death immediately rolled violently. An energy that caused everyone's heart to palpitate slowly brewed within it. When the pavilion master of the Yuyan Pavilion saw this, he sneered coldly. His palm grabbed at the sea of death below. The boundless great array of death, 2 colors of gold and red, immediately began to revolve rapidly. Every inch that it revolved would cause a ripple in space. A strange ripple slowly spread out from within. With the appearance of the ripple, the sea of death below also seemed to be affected. There was actually a huge flame that soared into the sky and surged towards the golden-red great array of death. The change in the sea of death caused Purple Night Flame's expression to change. She suddenly turned her gaze and saw that the great array of death had already absorbed a huge amount of energy from the sea of death. The vast and majestic energy caused her heart to palpitate. Only she knew how powerful her energy was. However, at this moment, it was being used against her. Swoosh. Receiving the support of such a vast amount of energy, the pale-faced pavilion master of the Yuyan Pavilion hurriedly changed his hand seals. The boundless great array trembled, and a blood-red light pillar that was covered with mysterious symbols suddenly shot out from the center of the great array. Finally, it blasted towards the purple night flame below with lightning speed. Song of Death Deprive. In the sky, a fanatical expression surfaced on the face of the pavilion master of the Yuyan Pavilion. His eyes greedily looked at the purple night flame below that had been struck. Those who were struck by the Song of Death would have their 5 senses sealed and gradually lose their consciousness. Using it to deprive, it could even deprive the soul of those who were struck. Swoosh! A huge scarlet light pillar shot down from the center of the great array. The speed of the light pillar was astonishingly fast. In the blink of an eye, it had pierced through the heavens and earth. Even the sea of death below was forcefully torn apart, creating a huge hole that was tens of thousands of feet wide. The light in the hole was so strong that it made people unable to open their eyes. Purple Night Flame's body was enveloped by the golden red light. Immediately, she felt a disintegrating energy that was mixed with destructive power erupting from the light pillar. Under such power, her gem-like eyes rapidly dimmed, and a pained expression surfaced on her pretty face. However, a thin layer of black light offset the destructive, disintegrating power and did not allow the Song of Death to completely deprive her of her strength. In the face of the strange power in the golden red light pillar, even with the black light layer blocking it, Purple Night Flame felt that her body was slowly losing its senses. Immediately, a roar that was mixed with extreme anger rang out in the heavens and earth. Under that scream, the golden red light pillar began to tremble. Half of the heavens and earth below began to boil violently. Pillars of fire that were tens of thousands of feet tall continued to erupt. The rumbling sound was as if the end of the world had arrived. Rumble. the space suddenly shook. At this moment, all the gods could feel that the elements in the surrounding space seemed to be frightened and hurriedly rushed toward the sea of death below. Even the curtain of fire that sealed everyone in the heavens and earth was shattered. The fragments turned into a rain of fire that fell from the sky. Huge fireballs fell like rain, and the space that they passed through turned into nothingness. It was as if darkness had enveloped this place. Seeing this scene, the pavilion master of the Serene Flame Pavilion's expression suddenly changed, and he roared, "Everyone, lend me your power and pour it into the formation. Otherwise, if it breaks free from the seal, the entire Taiyuan territory will be destroyed." As soon as the roar sounded, the pavilion master of the Serene Flame Pavilion changed his hand seal. The vast divine origin within his body, along with a monstrous pressure, madly surged into the formation. Seeing him like this, those who had hesitated to join forces after seeing the Song of Death hesitated for a moment. Then, they gritted their teeth and hurriedly poured all their energy into the formation. After receiving such a vast amount of energy, the Song of Death's formation immediately expanded. The golden red light pillar also became purer, and the energy it contained became more terrifying. I have the protection of the divine spark. Don't even think about sealing me. Feeling the increasingly terrifying power around him, his vision became increasingly dark. Suddenly, a furious roar rang out from the huge light pillar. In the distance, the black fire lotus suddenly trembled and exploded without warning. It drilled into the golden red light pillar. Waves of destructive energy violently collided with the light wall of the golden red light pillar. Puff! The frenzied counterattack of the purple night dark flame caused everyone's faces to turn pale. Large mouthfuls of blood spurted from their mouths, and they looked a little dispirited at this moment. The pavilion master of the Serene Flame Pavilion and Guoju almost lost control of the great array. The battle between them and the purple night dark flame was too intense. Even though they were underworld emperors, they could not last for long. Purple night domain destroy. In the golden red light pillar, the purple night dark flame's body was covered by a layer of black flames. The energy of the Song of Death was repelled by the black flames and could not get close. She glared angrily at the pavilion master and the others in the distance, who were desperately trying to hold on. A crazed look appeared on her pretty face, and a black flame surged in her clear eyes. Following her thoughts, the entire sea of fire region began to churn violently. Pillars of fire soared into the sky, and those who were touched by the flames did not even leave behind ashes. Song of Death. Seeing the frenzied state of the purple night dark flame, the expression of the pavilion master of the Serene Flame Pavilion changed slightly. A ferocious look surged on his calm face. He bit the tip of his tongue, and a mouthful of essence blood spurted out, shooting directly into the light pillar. Puff! As the pavilion master of the Serene Flame Pavilion sacrificed his own essence blood, Guiju and the others behind him also gritted their teeth and spat out a mouthful of essence blood that contained boundless energy, shooting into the light pillar. As everyone began to fight with all their might, the light pillar suddenly became brighter. Immediately, everyone saw that the golden red light pillar was actually showing signs of turning black. The terrifying power caused the sea of fire below to lose its color and actually calmed down a little. Spirit fall. When the pavilion master of the Serene Flame Pavilion saw this scene, the ferocious look on his face became even more intense. His hand seals rapidly changed, and in the end, a loud roar resounded throughout the world. As the roar sounded, a pure black fire pillar that covered the entire sealed fire region also soared into the sky. The golden red light pillar quickly shrank, and in a short moment, it turned into a light pillar that was only 1,000 feet in size. An extremely condensed energy roared downwards. They are playing with their lives. Withdraw quickly. Seeing the two energies that were able to tear apart the void gushing out at the same time, the Gold God King was so frightened that he spat out his tongue. The instant the Thunder God King reacted, he hurriedly grabbed UXIN and the others. Lightning flickered and turned into a bolt of lightning, flying out of the shattered sealed space. The others also saw this apocalyptic scene. All of them did not care about their lives as they rushed out of the sealed space. Immediately, everyone in this space scattered like birds and beasts as they fled. The two energies that could destroy the world also collided with each other in front of everyone's senses, just like comets colliding against the land. Chapter 178. As the colors clashed violently, everyone felt as if there was a sun behind them. The entire sky turned grayish-white, and even the gorgeous purple sea of fire turned into dead ash. There was no deafening explosion, but even so, the speed of everyone's escape increased by several times. It was as if they were escaping from a black hole. At the point of contact between the terrifying energies, only two kinds of energies were madly devouring each other. The surrounding space quietly collapsed, and even the pitch-black void showed cracks. A dark yellow light emitted from the cracks, and a strange energy leaked out. It was as if the space had solidified, but the collision of the two energies would break through the solidified space. Kacha! In the void, a large piece of black debris suddenly fell. The dark yellow light added a touch of color to this dead world, and everyone who was escaping could not help but look over. They saw that in the void, there was a small hole that was emitting a mesmerizing color. In the small hole, there was a dark yellow that seemed to be flowing. The ripples and the changing shades were like the waves of the sea. The dark yellow that appeared after the void shattered. Is that a time barrier? Looking at the flowing dark yellow, Jin Wang's pupils shrank slightly, and he could not help but murmur. Time barrier? UXIN also turned her head with great difficulty. She opened her evil spirit eye and looked at the dark yellow spot that had attracted the attention of the entire world. However, just as she was about to look at it, a destructive, corrosive power came from the side and directly blasted in her line of sight, causing her to groan and quickly close her evil spirit eye. Yishi nodded and said, "Yes, it is recorded in the ancient books that only a power that exceeds the peak of the Emperor God level can shatter the void and reveal the time barrier hidden in the void, or rather, the sea of time. It is a world formed by the pure power of time. The flow of time there is very chaotic. It is sometimes fast and sometimes slow. Those who are not gods cannot enter it. Does that mean that if one enters the sea of time, they can reverse time and go back to the past?" UXIN suddenly asked. In theory, yes. However, when you enter the time barrier, you can only go with the flow. You can't change the flow of time inside. When you come out, where you go, which time, which place are all uncontrollable. Maybe in the blink of an eye, you have drifted 1,000,000 years in the future or 10 million years in the past. You might not even have moved at all, Jin Wang said. The power of time. Hearing that, UXIN was slightly startled. She suddenly remembered that Linghong's sword was also called the sword that can split time and space. The time here should be referring to time. It can even split time. Such a powerful divine weapon. I really don't know who forged it. UXIN smiled bitterly. She could not help but touch the pattern on her arm. At this moment, Linghong's sword was severely damaged, but it could still release a power that could split time and space. She did not know if it would be able to split time and space with one sword if it was restored to its peak state. I say, you guys, at this moment, Thunder God King suddenly laughed bitterly. Everyone turned to look at him, seeing that his face was wrinkled like a bitter gourd. They could not help but be stunned for a moment. Then, they heard him continue. Didn't you guys notice that the speed is slowed down? I caught so many people by myself. Even if the speed of the lightning element can barely catch the tip of the light element's foot, this is not the way to play. If you guys don't help me, we will be pulled back. UXIN hurriedly turned her head around when she heard this. She saw that the place where the two energies had clashed had already shattered into many deep yellow potholes. An unusually majestic energy storm was quietly being born. At the spot where the two energies had clashed, a black spot the size of soybean, was erupting with a frightening suction force. Under the influence of that suction force, everyone's speed had slowed down. Ah! The sudden miserable cry caused everyone to be startled. They inadvertently turned their heads around, only to see that the frightening suction force caused some of the slower experts to be forcefully pulled into the two wild and violent energies. They disappeared until not even dregs remained. Sharp, miserable cries sounded one after another in this gray-colored sky. Many human figures wildly struggled in the midair. However, they were unable to resist the suction force. Finally, they were sucked into the destructive area of the two energies and were annihilated. UXIN's group felt their heads turn icy cold when they heard the miserable cries that repeatedly sounded. They were completely unable to guess what kind of unusual change had occurred at the spot where the two unusually large energies collided. The only thing they knew was that they would be sucked into it if they did not flee. Buzz, Thunder God King, who was pulling everyone, suddenly paused. His face suddenly turned red. The suction force behind him was becoming increasingly strong and frightening. It was already sufficient to interfere with his speed. "I will do it." UXIN clenched her teeth and let out a low cry. The light element surged out without any reservation at this moment. Bright golden particles lingered around her body. There were miserable screams and roars of human figures in front of them as they flew backwards uncontrollably. That final miserable roar caused one's heart to be filled with a chill. This time around, it seemed that it was the black color that dominated the world. That soybean-sized black spot was just like the sickle of a life reaper as it swiftly spread out from the middle of the energy storm. The entire sea of fire was pulled into the air by the frightening suction force before it surged into it and disappeared. The light element has been absorbed. UXIN was startled when she sensed the indistinct disappearance of the light element that had gathered. She turned her head and glanced at the black spot. Suddenly, she clenched her teeth, and spots of dark green life force surged out. They were swiftly turned into light elements. Her long ink-black hair also swiftly turned white. Majestic light particles wrapped around them. With a mere tremble, everyone's bodies were pulled into a thin ray of light that violently shot out. Everyone also went all out when UXIN began to go all out. They unleashed their various abilities and raised their speed to the limit. Finally, they charged out of the area affected by the energy storm at the last moment and paused miserably in the sky. Rumble! An earth-shattering explosion suddenly resounded across the horizon. The instant everyone escaped from the energy storm, two enormous energy torrents spanning over 100,000 miles shot out from the two ends of the black spot at the center of the huge energy storm, splitting the sea of fire below and the space in the sky into two. The overflowing destructive energy caused the space that was on the verge of shattering to completely collapse at this moment. The pitch-black nothingness eroded and enveloped the world, spreading out in strips like the sunset glow on the horizon. With the final shockwave, no matter how hard everyone tried to escape, they were still unable to escape from the shockwave that surpassed the speed of light. The entire sea of flames exploded, and instantly, a series of muffled explosive sounds rang out in the sky. Patches of blood mist condensed into a huge blood cloud that was as thick as a sea of blood. It was unknown how many people had lost their lives in this instant. Buzz! Even with UXIN's extreme use of the light element, she was still unable to escape from the shockwave. Just as the destructive energy surged into her body, a layer of silver-blue light appeared on her body. In her heart, the tiny ice-blue person hugging the whirlpool, Zither, finally felt the threat from the destructive energy and shot out from her chest. Ding-ling! The 7 strings moved at the same time, and musical notes rapidly spread out like water ripples. The 7 musical notes overlapped and resonated together like wind chimes and chimes. The 7 notes combined into one, and the whirlpool's zither vibrated at high speed. The notes seemed to materialize and jump out from the zither. A silver-blue barrier was formed in an instant, and the shock wave quickly swept past it, causing ripples to spread out. In that instant, the silver-blue barrier shattered as the shock wave retreated, and the whirlpool zither instantly retreated into Uxion's heart. It was a long story, but the shock wave came very quickly, and the whirlpool zither's defense was also extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, the defense and shock wave had disappeared. At this moment, Uxion and the others were floating in the sky at the edge of the Sea of Fire. Perhaps because of the fierce battle just now, or perhaps because of the evolution of the star, the Sea of Fire that was tens of millions of miles wide had shrunk countless times. At the edge of the Sea of Fire, there were many people with majestic auras floating in the sky. They were completely different from the people who had rushed out and had weak auras. At the edge of the Sea of Fire, everyone who had rushed out was still in shock as they looked at the space behind them that was gradually closing up. After reaching the edge of the Sea of Fire, the shock wave had finally reached its limit and gradually weakened. However, the terrifying aura that rushed towards them still caused the expressions of everyone present to change slightly. Following the disappearance of the shock wave, the energy storm that was like a black hole that swallowed the heavens and swallowed the earth also disappeared. Only a huge hole was left in the Sea of Fire that was continuously being filled by flames. Wild winds whistled. Within the Sea of Fire, who knew how many lives had been reaped? Uxion swallowed her saliva and wiped away the cold sweat on her forehead. Earlier, she had truly felt death. Whether it was the energy storm or the shock wave, even the pavilion master of the Hidden Flame Pavilion and the others would have died without a doubt if they had been hit. Uxion took a few deep breaths and suppressed the turbulent waves in her heart. Her gaze stopped at the Sea of Fire. Now, the Sea of Fire had shrunk to the size of 100,000 miles. In the depths of the Sea of Fire, there was an unusually dazzling bright light. Looking at its size, it had already begun to take shape. If the pavilion master of the Hidden Flame Pavilion and the others had not risked their lives, perhaps this purple star would have already taken shape. Life is so fragile and worthless. Seeing that the number of people who had come out was less than 1/10,000th of a number who had just entered, Jin Wang and the others could not help but sigh. Even though they had walked through mountains of corpses and seas of blood, they still could not help but lament when they saw such a scene in person. There are so many gods. Among these people who have rushed over, the weakest ones are divine realm gods. The strongest ones. Yishi held Uxion's shoulder and murmured softly in her ear. Her gaze swept across the sea of people in the sky, and her pupils could not help but shrink slightly. The strongest ones were the emperor of the underworld experts again, and there were 7 of them. Where is Purple Night Flame? Looking at the innermost part of the Sea of Fire, only Purple Night Flame, the people of the Hidden Flame Pavilion, and the Soul Lotus sect had not come out. Everyone's gaze swept across and finally fixed on an area. Uin pointed with her jade-like finger and said in surprise, they are actually not dead." Hearing the scream, everyone turned their gaze and saw a huge lotus in the Sea of Fire. Every petal hugged and seemed to be protecting something in the middle. When Uxion and the others noticed the lotus, the others also noticed it. Their gazes turned and flickered. This was the defensive divine artifact of the Soul Lotus sect. They had all seen it before. It was said to be able to withstand the full blow of an Emperor God expert. They did not expect that even this would be taken out. PFFF, when everyone's gaze was focused on the lotus, a soft sound came from the lotus. Soon after, under everyone's nervous gaze, the lotus slowly opened, revealing a group of people inside. As expected, the group of people who had appeared was the group from the Serene Flame Pavilion and the Soul Lotus sect. However, at this moment, all of them had frightening burn wounds on their bodies. Ugly burn marks covered half of their bodies, and purple flames danced on their wounds. Even the auras of the pavilion chief of the Serene Flame Pavilion and Guoju were dispirited. It seemed that even though they had survived the energy storm, they had paid a terrible price. Cough. The pavilion master of the Hidden Flame Pavilion sat on the ground, panting heavily. His robe was torn, and he was no longer as calm as he was when they first met. There was only a ferocious look on his face, and the flames in his eyes were dim. Suddenly, he turned his gaze and fixed it on the few people who were dressed in black and had a hood. His eyes were filled with flames, and he seemed to be extremely furious. He roared, "Qi Tiansheng, you bastard! My hidden flame pavilion will not let you off." The roar spread out in a mighty manner, causing everyone who heard it to tremble. Those who were lucky enough to survive frowned. Qi Tiansheng? Qi family? Could it be that today's matter was related to the Qi family? You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.